Chapter text: Minato knew that he would have to choose between his wife and his newborn son when the masked man revealed himself. It was a choice he never expected to have to make, least of all so soon after Naruto had been born. He should be able to enjoy this moment with his wife and their family. Looking at their midwife, the wife of the Sandaime, now laying on the ground as the floor colored red with her blood. He knew this man wouldn't go through with the things he was saying. He would kill his son. For a second, he was debating getting Kushina and making their escape, but her eyes told him she'd never forgive him if he did that. So he ran towards Naruto and caught his son in his arms, shushing him as he started to cry. Hearing Kushina's yelp, he closed his eyes, opening them to see his wife wasn't in the room with him anymore. Glancing once more at Baiwako's cooling corpse, before using a matrix at their home to teleport there, and lay Naruto in the bed they had prepared for his arrival. Pressing a kiss to his forehead, Minato didn't know if he would be there to see his son at the end of this evening. Screaming outside had him looking on as the Kyuubi no Kitsune appeared. His mouth pulled into a frown. He knew what that meant and what it meant for Kushina. Making his way there, he was just in time to sweep his wife off of her feet before she was crushed, seeing the drain on her face after the biju was extracted from her. Swallowing thickly, he hushed her, telling Kushina that she was safe now, that she and Naruto could keep each other company while he went and dealt with the masked man and the Kyuubi. Appearing in their home, Minato was on guard, sucking in a deep breath at the two men standing in the room he had left his son in. Dressed in flowing robes, the likes he hadn't seen anywhere but the daimyo's court. One with dark hair, while the other was blondish-white, eyes locking on him that had him taking a step back as he saw the Rinnegan in the dark-haired man. The blonde had pupil-less blue eyes, taking him in before taking a step forward and reaching for Kushina. Frozen as he didn't know what to do, the blonde's hand made its way to Kushina's bare arm, a pulse of pure chakra emitting from him. Kushina started to breathe easier, to not feel the strain of the extraction of a biju. "What did you do?" The man looked up, and for a moment Minato believed he could see recognition in the other's eyes. "Replenish her chakra, she won't be killed from the chakra drain." Gaping at hearing that, he didn't even know such a thing was possible. But he could see Kushina's pale cheeks flush before his eyes. Her labored breathing was evening out until she was asleep in his arms. "What?" The blonde grinned. "She doesn't have to die from this. She and your son will be safe, but we need to go deal with Kurama and—" He stopped short before looking at Minato. "The masked man, does something appear to be familiar to you?" Narrowing his eyes, Minato had to agree that the movement of the man had seemed familiar. He was obviously an Uchiha, but that didn't mean anything. The odd thing about this was that this man knew that he recognized the man. "What's it to you?" The dark-haired man chuckled. "Dobe, just tell him. He'll figure it out soon enough." Dobe, he certainly hoped that wasn't the man's true name, sighed. Before holding his fingers in a loose hold for a henge, the transformation taking hold made a breath hitch in his throat at seeing the man now standing in front of him. Naruto. A nod was all he needed to look at the baby still on the bed, looking at the grown man in front of him and not knowing what to do with that. We'll explain it all after we deal with Kurama and Abaido, but we don't have a lot of time." This had Minato gaping once more. Abaido. The older version of Naruto nodded, letting the henge fade again. He looked so different now. Even if Minato could see certain characteristics from himself and Kushina staring back at him now that he had seen it. Abaido was taken by Madara and an entity called Zetsu. He's been brainwashed, or that's the easy and short answer. We can stop him, just as we can stop Kurama. Connecting the pieces, Minato blinked. The Kyuubi. The dark-haired man nodded. The Kyuubi, although I don't think he even knows that there are people out there that still know his name. Elder Naruto rolled his eyes. You just want to see the look on his face when he realizes who you are, Indra. The now-named Indra grinned sharply, reminding Minato about some of the Uchiha had seen when he was younger. "That's nothing to what he'll do when he realizes you're here, Ashura. We agreed I would be the one talking to him while you and Minato deal with Abaido. Being here and seeing Kushina just helps as we know she won't die now. Your chakra is just too potent. Minato has so many questions, but the urge to protect Konoha is bigger. Looking on as Naruto, Ashura, reaches out his hand, he takes it, and finds himself teleported away from his home. Really hoping he'll be able to enjoy this all with his wife and son at the end of it. They were aware that this was a one-way road, there would be no going back from this. Not that it would mean anything. Looking around at the wasteland they would be leaving behind, there was nothing left for them anyway. Kaguya and the other Utsutsuki, after her, had made sure of that. Sasuke and Naruto had only survived because of who they were, or rather who they had been. After everything they had lost, gained, and lost again, they met the Seinen again as they were on the brink of death. He seemed sorry to see them again, before offering them one last boon. He could open up the connection their soul had to its previous incarnations, and could make them more than they were. Neither had hesitated to take the Seinen's offer on that, accepting the hand up as Naruto and Sasuke. When they woke up they had been Naruto Hashirama Ashura and Sasuke Madarindra. Dealing with the Utsutsuki came easy, making it clear that neither of them was willing to let them get away with this. But it left them alone in the aftermath of it all, everyone having fallen against the Utsutsuki and to defend their village and their family. Naruto hadn't been with Kurama since the start of the invasion, the Kitsune giving his own life so Naruto would live and look after Konoha. It's all been in vain. Indra had taken a hold of his brother's hand, they were more than best friends and rivals now, remembering a life where they had been brothers. For now, I'm sure we can use these powers and the knowledge to make a difference. Ashura had narrowed his eyes, looking at Indra with something he couldn't quite decipher. What are you proposing? Let's go back and change it all, there is nothing left here anyway. We could have a second chance, we and our incarnations, why not make use of it? Indra hesitated. I'd love a second chance when before all I had was you, I always had you but I couldn't see it. I didn't see it as Indra nor as Madara. It took you as Naruto chasing after me for years before I realized that I always had you. I want a chance to show you that you're not alone either. If it did something to him, Ashura didn't show it. Instead of holding out the arm they had both gotten amputated. The same one that they had been able to grow back between Ashura's chakra levels after his awakening, as well as Indra's fully awakened Rinnegan. It meant more than anything, letting Indra clasp his brother's forearm with a grin. Let's do this. Ashura nodded. We need to go back far enough that it'll make a difference. Grasping more firmly, Indra hummed, what about your birth? It would mean that there is no Madara there anymore. It would just be Zetsu, and we can deal with him easily enough. Blinking, Ashura frowned, and Abaido. You can deal with him easily enough between you and Minato, that's going to be a piece of cake. I'll go and deal with Kurama if he doesn't just freeze from shock. Laughing, Ashura shaked his head. It's bound to give you time to get close at the very least. Despite everything that happened, I'm sure Kurama will be happy to see us again. And you're right, Minato and I will be able to deal with Abaido just fine. He bites his lip. What about Mo Kushina? I don't want her to die, not if I can help it. Indra shrugs. I don't care about the timeline at this point, do whatever you want. The beaming smile he gets back gives him a flashback to a child Ashura and the toothy grin he was sporting most of the time at that point. How happy they had been before he had screwed up and listened to Zetsu above his own family. The hand still resting on his forearm squeezes. No bad thought, Indra, that's all in the past. We're getting a second chance at all of this, at being brothers, and at being able to save our precious people even if they are different now. You didn't know, neither of us knew that this was what became of it. They spent the better part of a month planning how they were going to do this. Ashura drew up the seal, calling on the other Biju, as they had been the only ones also surviving this hellscape. They contributed with pleasure, happy that they could have an afterlife anyway. Ashura and Indra never said it as such, and they didn't ask, but this was a one-way trip for all of them. They assumed it was the best outcome, and became giddy with excitement to be together with their father and former Jinchuriki again. Especially Shukaku, Son Goku and Juki, who had such a close bond with their Jinchuriki at one point. It was a tough goodbye, but one that had both parties looking forward to what came next. Opening their eyes, Ashura was making his way to the cot, in the room to coo at his younger version. Looking up when Minato appeared with Kushina in his arms, the yondaime was on edge in a way that they hadn't seen him before. Indra prompting him to show the yondaime what was going on helped, even more so when he helped Kushina to stabilize her chakra. It would take more than that, but at least it wouldn't kill her now. Looking at Indra as he disappeared, Ashura knew that his brother would enjoy what was going to happen now. He and Kurama always had that kind of relationship, at least before the whole Zetsu fiasco. Indra grinned as he hurried through the streets of Konoha, knowing he gathered quite the attention with his flowy robes and long hair. He kept his eyes shaded so as to not pull attention to his eyes. Stopping in front of Kurama's path, he grinned up at him. Seeing the moment Kurama noticed him, the genjutsu dissipated, telling him that Ashura was successful. Kurama. Hearing his name cemented the image Kurama no doubt believed he was dreaming, the expression quite amusing on a being as tall as he was now. Indra, Chapter 2, it was somewhat funny to see a creature as big as Kurama stare, dumbfounded at the man in front of him. His eyes almost crossed-eyed at trying to keep Indra in sight. Not that odd, as last time they had met Indra had killed his younger brother while the Biju were watching. For Kurama to feel on edge was just the beginning. Him being held under a genjutsu fabricated by the Sharingan would only add to that offense, and he knew it. It was one of the main reasons he was doing this to show just how much he had changed. What dying and being reborn again and again had done to him. How resonating with his past and future selves is what saves him in the end, what made him see just how much he needed Ashura in his life. How much the world needed Ashura, as people could say what they liked, there would never be someone else like him. Kurama, stop. The Kitsune still looked disbelieving, before he grumbled, "Isn't this what you and your descendants would have wanted, Indra?" Peace wiped away with a swipe of my mighty tails. Shaking his head, Indra sighed. No, it was misguided of me to think that the world needed more chaos. To do so makes me no better than Kaguya. She would have taken the world like that. Zetsu wanted me to take the world like that. At the mention of the pest's name, Kurama flinched back before he sneered at Indra. Looking him over, using those keen senses to smell if Indra was telling the truth or not. He didn't have anything to hide. He was done hiding and trying to get to things that weren't his by right. Ashura was indeed the one holding the future in his hands, even if it had taken him so long to see that. You are telling the truth. Now Kurama just looked lost in a way that Indra hadn't seen since he was a kid. Back when their father had just died, and the discourse hadn't destroyed all of them. Back before Zetsu managed to corrupt him, he would meet and talk to his Biju siblings and ask their opinions on things. It had been one of the reasons why they hated him and his followers, and later descendants, so much. He had been there for them still, until one day he was not. Nothing had been explained, and at the time they were all too angry at what was happening to not see that something from the outside was influencing him. Zetsu found me, as he found Madara, when we were at our lowest point, and took advantage of that to the point that we just lost sight of ourselves. Ashura helped me to find it again, and I can never be more thankful that he did that. Seeing the moment Kurama realized what he meant, his ears went flat against his skull, sulking as he often did as a kid. Ashura is here. Laughing, Indra nodded, pointed towards where Kurama had been before. He's helping the yondaime to subdue the poor misguided soul Zetsu sunk his claws into this time. If we make our way there, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to see you. Kurama didn't seem so certain of that, which only made Indra laugh more. The smile fading from his face, however, when he felt people approach him. Knowing that he had been keeping to the shadows mostly, but that time was over. Turning, he heard several sharp intakes of breaths as soon as they saw his eyes, the famed Rinnegan eyes staring back at them all. A large delegation of Anbu, Jounin and the Uchiha police force, who kept looking at him before glancing at the Biju standing still behind him. Sighing, he glanced at Kurama. Go, I'll be fine. Ashura still shines like the sun, so you'll be able to find him easily enough. He smiled when Kurama moved, slowly, and making sure that he didn't plant his paws in a building or on a human. Making the move go very slowly. But he managed to make it towards the Hokage monument, where Ashura no doubt was adding the last seals to Obaido's seal of hatred to break it. As soon as that was done, Kurama would be getting the cuddles of a lifetime. The clearing of a throat had him looking back at the people in front of him, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Danzo taking the front, his men trying to get others to leave. Not that any of them were doing so. Last time it had been known it was an Uchiha who did this. But this time, all they had seen was Indra, and he had subdued the beast. Before Danzo could make a move, the Sandaime was there, clad in full armor looking at Indra. His eyes widening, the only indication that he had seen the eyes he carried. "I don't know how to thank you for helping Konoha in this time of need." Shaking his head, Indra smiled. "It is of no trouble. My brother and I carry Konoha blood as well. Seeing it in times of need made it an easy decision." The Sandaime blinked. "Your brother?" Indra nodded. "He's with Yondaime Dono. He's an excellent healer and was making sure his wife and child were well taken care of." Seeing the looks on some of the people around them, particularly those that were close to Minato or Kushina. The looks of despair, as it was known that a Jinchuriki wouldn't live long past a Biju extraction, made him chuckle. Ashura is able to perform feats people would call miracles. Last time I saw Uzumaki, she was well, if recovering from childbirth. Ashura said he expected her to make a full recovery if she rested. Commotion further in the group had a woman push herself forward, her face alone enough to make him stop and stare for a moment. "You are certain?" Looking at his mother in another life, he nodded. "I do, Ashura." He was able to give her a life chakra transfer. "She won't bleed out," in a matter of speech, although it might take her a little longer than normal to heal from the strain she was put through. Mikoto shook her head. "That won't stop her, but the Biju Kyuubi." Looking to where they could all see his form resting, Indra nodded. Kurama was indeed extracted from her by a third party who wasn't sound of mind at the time. Ashura and Yondaime Dono are dealing with that too. Either or both of them should appear soon enough. He smiled, hoping it was somewhat soothing, as he was aware that he didn't have the best comforting method, but it seemed to do enough as all of those in front of him relaxed. The only one who didn't was the one he was expecting, made his move as soon as everyone else was otherwise occupied with the knowledge that it was already over. Konoha was safe, and both their Yondaime and his wife were well. Moving from muscle memory alone, he caught the kunai flung at him, letting a second one pass through as he tapped into something similar to Kamui. Using his Reiten to freeze those that had sought to harm him. The crowd around them parted as he stepped forward to come and stand in front of Danzo. His eyes took in the tension in the man's shoulders, as well as the panicked look in his eyes. He hadn't been expecting this, most likely believing himself to be the strongest one still. But Indra and Ashura would be able to squash him each and every time. Is this how Konoha welcomes those that aid them? He tilts his head, because it does explain certain things in the last couple of wars. Grinning sharply, he takes one last step forward to get a reaction out of Danzo, and the agents he knew were still in the shadows. After all, there were those sent out from Uzushio for help at the start of the invasion. They even made it to Konoha, but none of those made it to the Sandaime. Glancing at the man, he could see Saru Tobai's eyes widen again at the implications that he was throwing out there. Just as the mission that unleashed the Third War had been an alliance proposal from Iwa, where your men made sure none of those emissaries made it here. Pinning the blame on Hadake after slaughtering most of his team. He's nose to nose with Danzo now, knowing he is giving away secrets he isn't supposed to know. But as he told Ashura, he doesn't really care about the timeline either way. Your mistake was never thinking that there were others there that could see, others that do speak if you have the right people around you. He can feel the sunlight chakra behind him, which is why he released some of his hold on Danzo. However, as soon as the man lunges forward, he's caught in branches that wrap him up so tight he's having faculty breathing. A true Mokuton user can hear what nature is saying to them, which is how we knew what you did, Shimura Danzo. Let me tell you that we won't let it stand. Ashura comes to stand next to him, gathering as much attention as he always did with his almost illuminating chakra. Although perhaps it was because of the kitsune hanging around his neck like a furry scarf, purring up a storm. Ataudo, you didn't. Ashura pouted at him, but Kurama wanted cuddles. As much as I like him as big as a house, I can't cuddle with him like this. He'll be fine, I'm keeping it stored away for a little while. He deserves this. Rolling his eyes, Indra sighs, before a yellow flash signals the arrival of the yondaime. Kushina in his arms with baby Naruto, clutched to his mother's chest. Mikoto is the first to move, worrying about her best friend, and taking a hold of the baby so Kushina can be set to her feet. Swaying slightly as she takes a hold of her husband and sighs. Ashura is at her side in a moment, his hand glowing green as he pressed a hand first to her abdomen before moving up slightly until he's tapping her forehead. You should be fine, but try to keep off of your feet still. As soon as he said that, an Anbu disappeared before appearing with a chair for Kushina to take a seat in. Holding out her hands for her son as Mikoto came to stand next to her. The whole Konoha delegation looked at Danzo as if expecting him to say anything. He had been accused of so many things that not saying anything wouldn't look good. Looking at Ashura, he sees his brother nodded, showing that he had indeed directed parasitic spores into Danzo, which would be forcing him to loosen his tongue. They weren't taking any chances now, not with what the man had done in the name of his Konoha. Danzo sneered, I did it all to keep Konoha strong. Some outsiders would never see it like that. The outrage that came from the group was enough to show that none of Konoha's residents found that a plausible explanation either. The Sandaime and the Yondaime were looking at the old war hawk as if he had done the unthinkable, and honestly, he had. Peace and our sister village never deserved to suffer because of you. Minato spoke, with clenched teeth as he glared at the man in front of them. Neither of those was your decision to make, and makes me wonder what else you did in the shadow. Even after we told you to disband Root, to keep working towards a Konoha you could lead and twist to suit your ideal. Chapter 3, Chapter Text, there is silence for a moment before Danzo is sneering at the Yondaime. And what would a child know of war? You're not fit to lead, and neither was Hiruzen. I did what I needed to do to keep Konoha standing. Indra barked out a laugh, to make sure that she survives. You have cost Konoha her sister village and countless people. In fact, your hatred for the Uchiha clan is legendary. What's to say you wouldn't make sure that, as the only founding clan still residing in the village, you wouldn't take care of them too? Ashura places a hand on his arm, but he ignores it. They know that the discourse is already being spread around at this point. It wasn't until it lasted years that Mikoto and Fugaku saw fit to act against it. An action that eventually took their lives. It would be for the best, bastards, the lot of them. Seeing as a large portion of the people present were Uchiha, they reacted exactly as one expected them to react. Outraged and crying out at the notion that Danzo was planning on taking care of them. These new people who had appeared, and might as well saved Konoha, mentioned that they were aware of the things that Danzo had done. Even just guessing it wasn't anything good. His disregard to both Yondaime and Sandaime said a lot too, before there was some leniency, as he was one of the oldest shinobi in the village. But knowing that he was only here to make sure Konoha was changed into something that embodied his own utopia. It seemed that Yondaime saw it like this as well, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Danzo, and the way he was obviously sharing secrets no one would know otherwise. He glanced at Indra and Ashura, to which they both nodded to show they were doing something to make him spill all of these things. Shimura Danzo, I honestly should have expected something like this from you, but to hear you had a hand in so many missions gone wrong. All the while still planning on a coup within Konoha is enough to have your head. Before anyone could react, Ashura popped up. He also has a hand in the death of Kato Dan. Orochimaru's experiments and subsequent damages, Jiraiya's spy network, and Tsunadeheim's extensive stays away from Konoha. To name a few, the smug look on his face as he looked at Danzo, the way the old war hawk paled at the mention of that. Most likely coupled with the notion that he was spilling the secrets he was holding so close. To his heart, all this time was enough to make him see that this was the end of the line. Indra's Raitan was keeping his root nin from attacking too, something he probably didn't know as he kept making a gesture with his hand. They're not coming. Everyone turned to look at Indra as he spoke, a grin on his face as he looked at Danzo. I only lifted the hold I have on you. Your minions, on the other hand, are all rooted in the spot with Raitan. The grin only grew when Danzo tried to attack, despite still being trapped in Ashura's Mokutan and not able to do anything. Foaming at the mouth, at all of his hard-pressed secrets being thrown around. He didn't know it, but both Ashura and Indra held a grudge against the man for everything that he had done. With them throwing the timeline onto the trash, they could make sure that everything he was doing or had done wouldn't come to pass again. Not being able to save Yuzashio lay heavily on their minds. The knowledge they had now made it clear that the island was in the same place as the Utsutsuki lands had once been. Knowing that they had lost their home twice, both times at the hand of a madman, was almost too much to bear. Anbu, get him to tea, and I to make sure every inch of knowledge is extracted, so we know what we're up against, or who we need to contact to make amends. Minato's voice was cold as it rang out over the people standing there. As soon as the Anbu disappeared with Danzo, he turned to Hiruzen. I want a meeting with each elder and the clan heads. I don't believe that no one else knew about this. You didn't, but that doesn't mean the other elders are just as innocent. Hiruzen indicated his head before he too disappeared. Sighing, Minato turned to Makoto, opening his mouth to ask something only for the Uchiha matriarch to speak. We'll gladly look after Kushina and your son, Hokage-sama. I do believe you'll have a busy day and night ahead of you. She helped Kushina to stand, before nodding to one of the other Uchiha women that stood with her to take Naruto while she supported Kushina as they made their way to the Uchiha compound. Fugaku stayed behind, settling himself firmly to Minato's other side, opposite of Indra and Ashura as the four of them made their way to the Hokage office, settling down with a sigh as soon as they could, before his eyes found Ashura's to ask if this is how it had gone last time too. Ashura shook his head, looking down at Kurama around his neck before his eyes locked with Minato's again. It went very differently than Hokage Dono. It didn't take a genius to see the hurt and pain in Ashura's eyes, enough that Minato sucked in a deep breath before settling down. I see, Fugaku looked lost, but didn't comment on it, which was something that they hadn't been expecting. Then again, the Fugaku they had known, and this was a loose term in Ashura's case, had been stern, strict, and willing to do anything to make sure the Uchiha clan prevailed. Without the need of watching his back every second, maybe this would turn out to be a very different man. Minato sighed again, before looking at Ashura. What about? Ashura hummed, I think it's best to deal with that after this meeting. Others will be arriving within the minute, and I don't think we can explain everything quite that fast. Opening his mouth to argue with Ashura, Minato didn't get a chance before they were interrupted by a knock on the door. As he called for them to come in, Minato looked shocked to see several clan heads making their way inside, looking at the two at his side, and Fugaku standing there. Most of them were dressed in some kind of armor, or at least mission clothes, their eyes lingering on Ashura and the miniature kitsune around his neck. Hokage-sama, how is Uzumaki-hime and your child? The beaming smile coming to Minato's face put everyone at ease before he shared that Ashura had helped after the Kyuubi had been extracted. She was currently resting in the Uchiha compound with her best friend while they took care of things here. Hayashi let out a deep breath at that. The Hyuga elder knew his brother had been on a team with Kushina and would be happy to know that she was all right. They waited until Hiruzen entered, a frown on his face as he accompanied Himura and Koharu. They are the last ones to enter, and immediately their eyes fell on Ashura and Indra, before telling Minato not to call on them this late at night. Excuse me, Indra scoffed. Your village was almost reduced to rubble, but you wouldn't come out of your bed for something like this. The two elders directed their gaze on him. And who are you? You aren't a Konoha shinobi. Indra bristled, but settled down as soon as Ashura placed a hand on his arm. Something which brought him the attention of the elders who looked wide-eyed at the kitsune launching on his shoulders. the Kyuubi, so he is the one who set it loose. Ashura huffed, "First of all, Kurama is a he. Second of all, not in the slightest. My brother and I are the reason Konoha isn't a pile of stone and ash right now. Your cage asked you to come, unless of course you don't see Namikaze Dono as your cage." The both of them sputtered, but not before every pair of eyes in the room fell upon them in disbelief. What, of course he is the yondaime, isn't he? They're lying. The room went silent at that, staring in shock as Kurama used Ashura's shoulders to stand up, his red eyes looking at Himura and Koharu. "It speaks," Ashura hissed. "Kurama is a he, stop referring to the Biju as things." Paws digging into his shoulder, as well as a hand on his forearm from Indra, had him calming down, his eyes never leaving the two elders in front of him. "But he does have a point. You're lying when proclaiming yondaime as your cage. I wonder who it is that they do see as their cage then." Minato, standing there and willing to be silent, sighed. "I guess it's Danzo, isn't it?" They were on a team with the man. It wouldn't surprise me if they knew just about every little thing the old war hawk did. The silence after that statement was enough proof, making Minato mention for Anbu to take the two elders away for questioning. He didn't have a need for people who weren't willing to keep Konoha's best interest in mind. Hiruzen, on his turn, just sank deeper into the chair that he had been sitting on, his head in his hands as everything he had ever known came tumbling down around him. Who knew what it was that they had been able to pull right under his nose? He had trusted those people and saw what happened because of that. "Minato," the yondaime shook his head. "You didn't know, Hiruzen, we all didn't know. Maybe you can write to your students to ask them to come back to Konoha. That certain things came to light that we didn't know before, and it includes owing them all an apology." Hiruzen nodded, suddenly looking like the old man he was, bowing slightly towards Minato, before repeating the gesture towards Ashura and Indra, making his way towards the door to do just as his hawkage asked of him. As soon as the door closed, Minato turned towards the clan heads still around him, clearing his throat before sharing what had happened that night, including who had released the Kyuubi and why. Adding that Abaido was currently in a healing coma, as he had been brainwashed and wasn't himself right now. Mentioning to Ashura, Indra, and Kurama before sharing a brief introduction. Keeping true to the story, Ashura had shared with him on how they got here and what their relation with Konoha was, citing that they were brothers with roots in Uzushio who had been forced to live on their own after the invasion. Adding that, while they didn't look like the standard Uzumaki with their red hair, they certainly made up for it in chakra. "I wouldn't have my wife if they didn't interfere." Kushina was the previous Jinchuriki of Kurama. With his extraction, her chakra was bleeding out, at least until Ashura managed to do a live transfer. She is tired, as one can expect from childbirth, but she's expected to make a full recovery. A cheer of relief went through the room, before Minato jumped into what had happened with Danzo and what they had found out the man had done to not only Konoha, but other villages as well. He didn't seem to want peace, had willingly and deliberately done everything in his power to prevent peace even. His root organization is still active right now. Thanks to Indra, every one of those agents was petrified, and they are in T and I right now to be evaluated on what needs to be done. If it's even possible to get them used to normal society again, or if we're doomed to a group of people that can't do anything but kill. Shaking his head, Minato added, "I called you here to let you know. Any questions can be directed towards me at any time, but right now I'd like to go and check up on my wife and son." With that, they all dispersed, congratulating Minato and thanking Ashura and Indra. The latter two stayed in the office for the time being while Fugaku and Minato left. They didn't really know where to go right now. Chances were that Minato and Fugaku would return with Kushina and Mikoto in tow, which was what they needed to explain everything to the four of them. I don't really look forward to that conversation. Chapter 4, chapter text. So, are you going to tell me how it is that the both of you are here? Lost in thought now that they were alone, Indra and Ashura jumped at the voice of Kurama, having forgotten that the Kitsune was even here. With everyone leaving, they decided to just wait here and see how they were going to share what happened or what was going to happen. Kurama. The kitsune tilted an eyebrow, looking amused. It's been a while since the both of you have been this skittish. Then again, I also never expected to see the both of you again. Ashura sighed before running his hand over Kurama's head. A lot happened, and not everything will be that easy to explain. Indra added. I think it best to wait until the Hokage returns. He knows a bit, but I assume he'll want to fill in Kushina, Fugaku, and Mikoto too. Let's just say that a lot has happened, and a lot is tied to you as well, Kurama. Blinking, it was obvious the kitsune hadn't expected that answer. But he laid down again, wrapping his tails around Ashura's neck like a fury scarf before closing his eyes. It gave the two of them a moment to think about what they wanted to share. Danzo had been taken care of, so that was one less problem. That only left Abaido, but he was so tightly sealed that not even Kaguya could wake him. That reminds me, what happened with Abaido. Ashura grinned before he explained what had happened. How it was clear that Zetsu didn't expect them to appear, Minato yes, but not Ashura as well. His appearance alone was enough to get the Spectre to back off, and to leave Abaido alone. You know he's dependent on Zetsu right now, so he just fell like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I countered his seal of hatred before putting him under. Ashura frowned. He was in really bad shape, Indra. Almost like he was tethering on the edge of life and death. In fact, it's a wonder and a half that he was even here in the original timeline. I used the cells they implanted to my advantage and had them heal him. He should be slowly coming around, if he wasn't sealed right now, meaning he can join us, as I'm sure Kakashi will be trailing after Minato and Kushina when they return. If they didn't already hate Zetsu, knowing that he would leave the person they had tried to get to take the blame all alone, especially in enemy territory, was despicable. Luckily, the both of them were well aware of what kind of person Zetsu was and what he was capable of doing. Now we wait, I guess. Ashura nodded, looking around the office, grinning no doubt at the fact that very little had changed in the last 100th years. Indra didn't want to mention it, having some fond memories of this place as Madara, but he could see Hashirama shining through in Ashura right now. It's still the same, isn't it? Humming, Ashura went to the desk and touched a burned spot. Even that scorch left behind from that one time, Tobirama pranked you. Indra scoffed. He had it coming. It's weird sometimes, isn't it? To be one person, but also not to have all of these memories. It's worse now, before there was nothing left to trigger a memory. But now, here in Konoha, it's like everything is triggering something. I like it better this way, though. There was no need to stay in that barren wasteland. They stayed quiet after that, with Indra settling down on one of the seats left over from the meeting while Ashura went around the office, touching things here and there, seemingly very taken by the portrait of Hashirama. Poking at it, he grinned at seeing himself on it. Do you think the storage seal behind it is still active, Indra? His brother hummed. I guess so, unless you never told Tobirama about it and he never informed the Sandaime. Trying to think if he told Tobirama that much, at least in his life as Hashirama, he couldn't remember. All the memories of who they were made it difficult to know just what had been done by who. I don't remember, Indra sighed. Then at least wait until the others are back. I don't want to deal with that fallout. Kurama, now awake again, was looking at them both. One red eye concentrating, no doubt having heard part of that conversation and filtering that away for later, or trying to make sense of everything that had been shared. He was smart, and he had been the one Ashura had most of his talks with before. I know you have questions, Kurama, but we'll answer them soon. No sooner than he said that, a knock sounded before an Anbu made their way inside. Silvery white hair told them both this was Kakashi, or Inyu, who nodded. Hokage-sama asked me to collect you. He, Kushina-san, Uchiha-dono, and Mikoto-san would like to talk to you. Indra stood before they both followed Kakashi, letting him lead them towards the Uchiha compound. Looking around, happy that most of the village was still standing. More than one person was looking at Kurama, where he was hanging around Ashura's neck, their eyes wide at what they were seeing. It was refreshing to be in a village again, especially as theirs had fallen so long ago. Knowing they were here in so many different times helped too. Nothing was as they remembered it to be, which was a good thing. Kakashi led them through the gates at the Uchiha compound, the guards there nodding back at him before turning to look at Indra and the eyes he sported. Eyes that stayed on them until they were led inside of a house and asked to take off their shoes. Once done, they were led inside to where Fugaku, Mikoto, Kushina, and Minato were waiting. Another Anbu was there too. Their chakra signature relieves them to be Itachi, which made sense. Minato knew about who they were or who they would become, so he gathered those that needed to hear this. Settling down when it's mentioned they can do so, Ashura passes by Kushina before actually taking a seat. Grinning at her as he nods and sends some healing chakra through her coils. It's all settling nicely, even if she needs to take it slow for a couple more days. Minato sports a small smile. I figured. He makes a hand gesture, to which Ashura laughs. Yeah, I think it best. We don't want to include too many people right now, but this is the best core to start with. If all of you consent, Indra here can show you. Fugaku, mirrored by Itachi being him, leans forward. And what exactly will you show us? You're strangers, even if you saved us, but you're still strangers. Glancing at Minato, who shrugged, Indra sighed before molding chakra and performing a henge. Grinning at the people that had been his parents and big brother, because 20 years ago, I'm laying there. He points at the baby version of him who is laying against his mother's chest. At the same time, Ashura also lets a henge go over him. I never had a chance to meet either of you, which is why I would do anything to give my past self that chance. Looking at Minato, who nods, Ashura releases a seal before Abido comes tumbling out. His eye roaming over the people in front of him before settling on Minato and Kakashi, a frown on his face. What's going on? Kakashi, or Inu, chokes before he pulls off his mask. Abido. Ashura nodded before he turned to Fugaku and Mikoto. Abido was brainwashed by someone who plays a significant part in the next part. He wasn't totally there with what happened tonight, but he needs to know what happens next. We can show you what happens next, if you're allowing us to. Even before the henge is left to fade, they get permission to show what they want to show them. Abido, still out of it, lets Kakashi pull him in between the headache and Minato before looking at Indra. Kurama also jumps down and settles down, shockingly next to Kushina before the genjutsu takes over. Now we wait. Ashura leaned back on his hands. Now we wait, what are you showing them, by the way? Indra looked his way. Everything. As they came out of it, Kurama growled before he bounded over and curled up in Ashura's lap. He could feel the little kitsune trembling there, no doubt feeling like it was all too much and not enough. Hesitating for a second, Ashura ran his hand through Kurama's fur, smiling when the kitsune's trembling died down and he relaxed. I'm sure you all have questions. This is Indra speaking, looking at all of those in the room one at the time. There were bound to be questions after everything that they had been shown. Even now he can see the tense lines in all of them and the worry in their eyes. Minato especially looks like he wants to rage, knowing that in another life he had died here tonight and there would be nothing left to fight for. He would have lost everything. Why? Indra hissed. Zetsu was born out of the hatred Kaguya had for our father. He doesn't want anyone to survive. All he wants is for Kaguya, and not even the person but the Shinju, to appear and devour what he believes is theirs. In doing so, the whole world would be doomed. You saw what he did last, what happened, and what was needed to stop them. There was nothing left at the end of it all. Well, we were, but that was about it. Ashura huffs. From what we gathered, he made sure to keep an eye on certain individuals. He was the master puppeteer behind the Akatsuki, and he is without a doubt the person Danzo was getting his information from. If there is a Danzo is Konoha, I'm sure there were others in the other villages that he could use, mold, and discard when needed. Silence settles around them before Abido speaks, and Rin, taking a deep breath, Indra shares, where do you think Kiri got the idea to seal Aisabu into her? Given that this was at the height of the war, there would be no need for that. least of all into a shinobu whose teacher was one of the best fuinjutsu masters ever lived. She also had a seal on her, which changed her way of thinking and made her believe killing herself was the best option. Kakashi and Obaido both flinch at that, both of them never forgetting about that part. Indra, or the part that had once been Madara, felt some remorse for that. She shouldn't have to die, not when there had been a lot of other solutions. A lot of the happenings had a hand in them, either Zetsu or someone working off of Zetsu's information. If you want, I can get you a list. Minato nods. That would be appreciated. I think a lot needs to be done to ensure that doesn't happen. Smiling, Ashura nodded, before asking what they plan on doing. Going to AIM and seeing about talking to Nagato about it all. He needs to know. Contemplating, Minato disappears in a flash before arriving back with shinobi files. Let's make sure you're on file then. From what I saw, we'd best make sure you're allied to a village or others will come and scoop you right up. Snorting, they both take the bundle and start filling it in, never expecting that they would get a second chance at this. Chapter 5, chapter text, it doesn't take them long to fill it all out, even if it felt surreal to be doing so. Neither Asura or Indra had believed it to be this easy to have a life again. But they had to be honest here, helping the Yondaime Hawkage and his wife in making sure neither of them died, and Kurama was stopped before anyone could die. Glancing at each other now and again, it was hard filling in a profile with information that wasn't incorrect, but also didn't showcase all of their powers in one go. Despite trusting the people in the room with them, that didn't mean that nothing about this could fall into enemy hands one day, which was something they wanted to avoid at all costs. I think that's it. Minato tilted up an eyebrow, taking the files back and reading over them while his eyebrows continued to climb onto his forehead. It didn't take them a lot to figure out what he was reading and who he was reacting to. To see those abilities listed, even if it wasn't a full list, would make anyone have second guesses. I wasn't quite expecting this, to be honest, but I guess given the circumstances, not being fully truthful is the best way to go about it. Asura beams at him. We can't risk it, but we tried to be as close to the truth as possible. They had written down 2 chakra natures, even if they were capable of much more. Asura had also added Mokuton, as he wouldn't be able to hide that. He was also aware that Indra had added a Rinnegan, as he couldn't go and hide that either. Their names were their own, Indra and Asura, while their clan was the Utsutsuki. Maybe not the most undercover name they could use, but for now that didn't matter. They needed to keep this in the back of their head, so that at one point Zetsu would find out anyway. It helped that they had no other real connections to Konoha clans. If Indra had still been sporting the Sharingan, this would be much harder, but a Rinnegan would make it easier. It might also help when they talked to Nagato. After all, for the longest time, he would think that he was the only one with such eyes. What are we telling people, seeing as a lot of Konoha saw you with me, or dealing with Kurama? People talk, sadly enough, so we can't just let the rumors lead a life of its own. Asura bit his lip. Tell the people that we were once people from Uzushio who found their way to Konoha. If Kushinaheim is so inclined, she can state that we were in contact with her, as the clan head. It might not be the full truth, but it's close enough. Looking at the woman who had been his mother at one point, Asura didn't know what to think. The wonder was still in her eyes, as was the exhaustion from childbirth and Kurama's extraction. But she was already nodding, agreeing to that plan without any doubt. Mikoto and Fugaku were looking at Indra. How did it come to that? Sighing, he explained that in their time, Minato and Kushina died as Naruto was born. Without them, to support the Uchiha clan. Danza had free rein to start a whisper campaign about the Uchiha, to the point that they were planning a coup to take Konoha over as one of the founding clans. Shisui's main Jikayo was meant to defuse the coup, but Danzo wounded him and stole one of his eyes to make that an impossible route. Itachi was given the other eye before Shisui killed himself and was never found. Given an impossible task, Itachi took on the role of Kin's slayer if he could let one live. I was the sole survivor in Konoha for the longest time, and while at one point Obaido, Itachi and Madara were around, I was the only one who would make it off of the battlefield at the end. Looking at Asura, he added, "We were the last ones left, the only ones who could do something and who were willing to give it our all. It's why we came here, to give another version of ourselves a chance we never got. We're something else entirely, and I think the gods gave up on stopping us as long as Asura draws breath." His younger brother and best friend squeaked before smiling and running a hand through his hair. "I do have a gift to pull off the impossible." Kurama, oddly enough, was the one who spoke. "You have been that way since Otu-sama was still alive. It's one of the main reasons he chose you as his successor. He knew that if there was one out there able to work against the end of the world, it would be you." The kitsune grinned. "It's nice to see that he was right, seeing as you changed the very flow of time to be given a second chance of life together with Indra." Sighing, Asura nodded. "It needs to be someone able to ignore whatever Zetsu is trying to whisper in their ears. No one else except the Biju would know who he was, and no one was listening to them either way. We are the easy choice, even more so allied to a village once more." As if that was what he needed to hear, Minato opened his desk and took out 2 forehead protectors to hand to them. Smiling when neither tied to around their forehead, but instead tied it around their obi to still be seen by the world. "What are you going to do now?" Exchanging a look, Indra mentioned going to aim to talk to Nagato, mentioning to Minato and Kushina that he was a student of Jiraiya and in Uzumaki. He and his teammates had been there after the fall, and had been victims of Danzo's schemes to the point they lost the 3rd member of their crew. Or they would have, but Albedo was here now, and Asura had to be honest, he didn't have a clear timeline about this right now. Looking at Albedo, he asked if he knew about a redhead in AIM that was sporting the Rinnegan. "I haven't seen him. I know that Madara spoke about a child he had given his eyes to, but I never actually came into contact with him. Zetsu went to check up on him now and again, but I never joined him. I'm quite sure that it was something that would happen soon, though." Humming, Indra nodded. "Makes sense. For Danzo to have a hand in AIM's revolution, he needed the Sandaime at the wheel as he wouldn't question where he was all the time. With the man dead, Hanzo the salamander doesn't have enough to keep Akatsuki off of his back, and keeps it from becoming the organization that was used as the scapegoat for Zetsu's plan." Asura beamed, grinning at the notion that they could just go and talk to them instead of having to be on guard. That also made sense, as Rin wasn't dead for that long, all in all. Which meant that Isabu still had to reform and be sealed inside of Yagura, which they wouldn't let happen now that they had a way around it. That means we can make sure the Bloody Mist doesn't happen either. Instead, there is just keeping an ear to the ground for Zetsu and make sure he doesn't gather an army. I'm sure that the likes of Kekurzu and Hidden don't mind where their coin comes from, as long as they get it. Turning to the adults, he adds, "So we're heading to AIM and seeing about maybe talking to the other Biju if we find them." Indra, who Asura saw looking at him, added, "But that can wait. I think you all have more questions, don't you?" That seemed to open the floodgates as they tried to get to know these young men. Gods in their own right, but at the same time the babies sleeping in their mother's arms. It was surreal in a way. More than once did Minato and Kushina look at Asura when they realized that this version of their son had never met them. They were strangers to him, and that in itself hurt. That much was obvious from their eyes. Mikoto and Fugaku had similar thoughts, knowing that their youngest would lose everything in a single night by the hand of his older brother at that. The child that looked after Sasuke like a mother hen. To know that they could drive Itachi to do such things made the couple glad that Danzo was no more, and Minato was still Hokage. They talked until well into the night, after which Kushina led them to the Uzumaki compound to keep them somewhat secret. Asura made sure she stayed off of her feet as much as possible and checked her over again. Pulling his hand away from her, he grinned, "You're healing up well. Your chakra levels will stay low for a little bit as they try to fill up where Kurama was sealed away. But I don't see anything bleeding out, except that you should be just fine." Kurama purred, in a way happy that he was free from the seal. Asura knew that the oldest of the Biju never truly forgave himself for giving Maido and Hashirama a way to seal him away. Looking back, he had seen it in his eyes when Maito sealed him so many years ago. Scratching him behind the ears where the kitsune was draped over his shoulders again, Asura giggled at the sound that came out of him. I never knew he was like that. Looking at Kushina, Asura nodded. It was knowledge that was lost over the ages. The Biju are forces of nature, so obviously humans are wary of them. I know that when we died, there were already those among both our followers that had hinted at binding the Biju to them and using their power as a weapon. To know that eventually happened hurts, as they are free beings and shouldn't be chained. Indra nodded, which had Asura adding, if we can do so, we will set them free again. Without any of their Jinchuriki dying on us, as we don't want to start an international incident. Chuckling where he had been sitting with Naruto in his arms, Minato nodded. Please don't, least of all with a Konoha sigil on you. I don't think or Unoki have forgiven me, for the last time they had a Konoha shinobi across from them. Laughing out loud at that, Indra shook his head. Just put them in a room with Asura, he'll straighten them out. It's what he did with me and a number of other people. I wouldn't worry about that. Trust me, this idiot manages to get people to think his way with words alone. Blushing at that, Asura tried not to react to that. But when Kurama joined in again, stating that it had been like that for a while, already Asura found that he wouldn't want it any other way. To be the youngest again, and to be teased and complimented in the same breath by his older brothers. Laying in the bed that they had been given for the night, Asura couldn't help but look out at the stars, hoping that their father was looking down on them. Knowing that his sons would set right what it was they screwed up. Kurama laid curled up at the foot of the bed, obviously still enjoying his freedom and knowing he could trust Asura with his chakra. Indra was one room over, and his hot and heavy chakra was enough to make Asura realize that it would all be all right. They were together after all, and if there was one thing they had learned, was that they could do anything as long as they were together. Asura asleep, looking at Kurama, seeing one red eye open and looking at him, he nodded. Hi, Niai-sama. Chapter 6, chapter text that morning, while waking up in the Uzumaki compound felt unreal. For one, they could hear people all around them. That had been a long time before they had heard that again. As the last ones in the future they wanted to prevent, they got used to the silence and the accents of other people. To have that all around them was odd in a way that neither of them was able to accept just like that. This was indeed a new chance, one they had known they would be getting, but that didn't make it any less difficult. Indra pulls him close as Asura opens his eyes, the way all of this was getting to him obvious from the way his eyes started tearing up. Knowing what they came here to prevent, and the way they were more than willing to take on. Saving their parents, even if they weren't their parents anymore. As well as a possibility of getting through all of this, in a way that would truly bring change, was getting to be too much. They had been so alone before, there had been no one else. But all of the sudden they were in a village that was bursting with life, and it felt so good. Kurama, having slept at the end of the bed in a smaller version, came closer to curl up on Asura's stomach. The heat of his body and fur anchoring him to the present just as much as Indra's arms around him did. Was it truly that awful? Their oldest brother was looking at them, which had Indra nodded. You saw the memories. Kurama, it was exactly like that, and I for one am not planning on letting that happen again. If I run into that plant bastard, I'm turning him into fertilizer. He kept O2-sama out of the loop and all of us too. If no one is stopping him, who knows what will happen? Wiping at his eyes, Asura sighed. He'll help Kaguya take over the world and every living being in it. There is nothing we could do, no matter how many times we go back. If it's just the two of us, there is no future. Kurama looks down at that. What happened to all of us? The Biju of your time. Looking at each other, Indra and Asura took turns in mentioning that Kurama was the only one who died. Who would have given up everything he had to make sure that Naruto, or he still had been Naruto at that point, would survive. The others were there when we went back. They said their goodbyes and gave us a boost in chakra to make the jump. I think Shukaku told me that they were looking forward to meeting you and O2-sama on the other side, to look over all of us in any way possible. Whining at hearing that, Kurama curled in closer, letting them soak into his presence before someone knocking on the door had them looking up. "Breakfast is ready if you want some." Looking to the other, they got out of bed to freshen up. As soon as they did that, Asura let Kurama take his spot on his shoulders again. Grinning when the kitsune settled down and wrapped his tails around Asura's chest like a fury harness. Getting to the kitchen, they saw Minato cooking while Kushina was sitting down, nursing Naruto with a soft smile on her face. Looking at the face of her newborn son, no doubt thinking about the fact that Asura never had this. Smiling, he settled at the table and ran a hand over Kushina again, humming as he found that she was recovering very nicely, especially with the stress her body had been through. But he was certain with the Hawkage as her husband, he could count on her being left off the mission roster for a while still. "This all smells amazing." Laughing, Minato sets the last of the pans on the table before taking hold of Naruto so Kushina can eat. Grinning at the baby in his arms, the joy in his eyes is something that Asura can remember from the end of the first round in the war. The way Minato had looked at him, that look in his eyes then too. "I think we can stay for close to midday before making our way to AIM, see what happens in between Konoha and there. I'm sure that Nagato is willing to listen, especially once we tell him what is truly happening." Abaido, stumbling out of a room with Kakashi on his heels, sighs, "I don't think you'll need a lot indeed." He and Conan always asked what I was planning and why they didn't know everything. If you can share that piece, they would cease everything they did so far. No Jinchuriki has been captured after all. Huffing, Indra laughs. "It also helps that I have a much better grasp over my Rinnegan. I'm sure with Asura dubbing as a chakra battery, we can get Yahiko here too. We weren't taking the timeline in account anyway, so better to just kick it out of the way while we're at it." Laughing, Asura nodded, "I'm sure I can do that. It's the least they all deserve." As he opens his mouth, Indra assures him they will stop at Uzushio too. Mentioning to Kushina that while it was her homeland, it had been the Utsutsuki clan compound once upon a time. "A lot of the things there are still us, and I think everything Uzumaki is ours by right too. Well, ours and yours, we'll bring it back here so it will not be forgotten." The sad smile she sent their way is enough to give them permission, whispering that she would have wanted her father to meet her son. Both her sons, as she looks at Asura too. It feels weird to think like that, as he's older than she is right now, even if he doesn't look like it. But a part of him will always see her as his mother. Standing and letting Kurama off to curl up in Indra's lap, he hugs her tightly. "We'll make sure that nothing gets forgotten. There aren't as many of us anymore, but that doesn't mean that it will all be lost. I refuse to let it all get lost." Nodding into his shoulder, tears fall on the top of his clothes, and he allows them to fall as well. Mourning the children he knew, he had who never got to know their father, and those descendants who never knew what they were fighting for until it was too late. "I'll bring it back, and I'll make sure that as many as I can find will have the proper burial rites." With that, he pulls back from Kushina's embrace to leave with Indra and see what they needed to go and butte. There was enough that still needed to get done, they were sure of that. "You aren't leaving yet, are you?" Indra shook his head. "No, but we might need more than just the clothes on our back before we leave Konoha. I promise we'll come back here before setting out, but that means getting some shopping done." Frowning, he looks at Minato. "What are the odds we can get something above a C rank to get us some cash?" Tilting up an eyebrow, Minato hums, "I'm sure that someone out there needs to be done, even if it's just courier for whatever needs to get to the daimyo." Patting Asura on the back, Indra shoves him forward. A smile on his face as he knew that Asura had managed to perfect Minato's jutsu as he didn't have anything else to do. He had been able to use Minato's markers too, as there was still one with the daimyo they could get there in a moment and back. "I'll do that, I'll be back in a flash and all that." The joke had all of them laughing before Indra and Asura made their way to the mission office. Noticing the way people were looking at them, it was obvious they didn't know what to make of them. Smiling at them and nodding at the shinobi they encountered, they found the Sandaime at the mission desk, gaping for a moment before greeting them with 2 B-rank missions. One was a courier mission to the daimyo, while the other was helping rebuild by going through everything that had been found in Danzo's house. Offices and in the side of the mountain, they now knew to be a route base. Indra volunteered at that before they each went their own ways, knowing that by the end of the day these would be finished and they would be able to shop with the money. As powerful as they were, there was nothing against being prepared. For the sake of Konoha and the daimyo, Kurama was staying back in the Uzumaki compound. He was sleeping on the bed that Indra and Asura had slept in, to catch up on sleep, which he hadn't been able to do undisturbed since before Maido. The missions assigned were done before the sun went down, giving them 2 B-rank pays to prepare. However, that also meant they wouldn't be leaving Konoha after noon as planned, not that they minded. It was nice to be able to walk through a village that was alive once more. It feels strange, doesn't it? Looking at Indra, Asura nodded. It's almost like this is a dream. I tried dispelling a genjutsu several times just to make sure. Nothing happened so far, so I think this is real. They both laugh before Indra looks around. We'll protect this, you know we will. They stay silent for a little, before getting something to eat and making their way to the Shinobi district. Indra needed a new sword, and Asura could do with a stock-up of kunai, shuriken, and sealing paper. Once in the Shinobi district, it was clear that a lot more people were looking at them. Those had seen them tame a Biju and save the Hokage's wife when everyone believed her to be lost. Indra-kun, Asura-kun, I had hoped to run into you here. Looking up, they see Mikoto coming their way, a sling over her chest carrying Sasuke, while Itachi is walking next to her. The young face and the clear eyes is enough to make Indra choke, but he hides it well. Asura grins, Mikoto-san, we wouldn't have gone without passing by, you know. The Uchiha matriarch laughs, I know, but still. I heard you're out here shopping to be prepared for your mission. Nodding at that, they see more than one person looking away. No doubt storing away that information, which is enough for what they need it to. They need to appear as normal as possible. They will do as and make sure that whoever thinks differently will find nothing out of the ordinary. Will you let me accompany you? They let her, allowing her to lead the way as they prepare. Finding that the unconventional family time has a way of soothing wounds neither of them were aware they had. Chapter 7, Chapter Text. It felt weird being in Konoha again, even more so in a Konoha that was whole and healthy. With Danzo not posing a problem anymore, Indra and Asura knew that the village would be around for a long time to come. That, however, didn't take away that they weren't used to so many people around them. Additionally, their striking appearance got a lot of stares too. The rumor mill would have covered that there had been someone out there able to take on the Kyuubi and win. Of course, now that said Kyuubi was lounging around on one of their shoulders, they obviously didn't know what to think about that. Asura ignored them, his life as Naruto teaching him that people would talk regardless of what happened. Better to learn to ignore it all. Indra, on the other hand, didn't care much about the whispers either. His eyes were glued to the baby Mikoto carried along. It was him or a version of Uchiha Sasuke. One who, if he got his way, wouldn't ever go through the same things he went through. Despite knowing their way, they were happy to let Mikoto lead them, not wanting to give the impression that they knew too much. Despite gaining favor with the clans and the Hokage, that didn't mean that there would be questions still. The first shop they entered was a weapons shop, not that either of them used a lot of those. It didn't hurt to have some kunai and shuriken with them. Even without using them as weapons, they could come in handy. Indra did use a sword, which Asura knew he would be looking for again. Peculiar as he was about his sword, it was a good thing they had arrived at a shop that was known to accept custom builds. Grinning, before making his way to the smith once he saw the sign, Indra was going to make sure he would have an amazing sword once more. His former one, as well as the one he had used as Madara, had been a fine blade. Sighing, Asura snorted, "We lost him. Indra loves a good sword." With him losing his previous one, I'm certain he'll do everything he can to get one as close to it as possible. Mikoto giggling at that, hushing Sasuke when he gave a small sound at being juggled. Grinning at the baby, Asura ticked him before turning his attention to Mikoto again. Indra's the only one out of the two of us who still uses weapons, swords then of course. other than that we both have too many chakra-intensive moves that get the job done just as well. Despite saying that, Asura did make sure to pick up a general pack for both himself and Indra. For all that they were heavy hitters, there were moments subtlety was key. On top of that, it never hurt to be prepared. As he looked at Indra as he went about haggling to get his sword remade, Asura couldn't help but just enjoy the people around him. For so long they had been the only ones around. In a way this had scared them. Mikoto, standing next to him, smiled softly. "I take it this isn't easy for you." Shaking his head, Asura's hand finds Kurama's head on his shoulder where the kitsune is napping. "It isn't. We were alone for so long that it's odd to be in a village once more. We honestly didn't think we'd be able to do this." Her hand comes to rest on his shoulder. "No, you aren't alone now. I don't think you'll ever be alone, as well connected you both are." A nose being pressed to his neck made it clear that Kurama was also listening. Despite what he had told Indra about keeping Kurama small, Asura also did it for the comfort it brought him. In his first and his last life, he had been exceptionally close to Kurama. With everything that happened with Kaguya, he had been certain he would never see him again. To know he had a second chance now, he didn't think he would be able to let go. Smiling at Mikoto, he thanked her. "I guess it still needs some getting used to." She giggled at that, before they both turned when Indra approached them with a smug grin on his face. A receipt on the terms of his sword in hand, allowing Asura to pass and pay for their new gear as he followed Mikoto outside. Paying for the gear, Asura went to join them outside, letting Mikoto lead them towards the next shop, which happened to be the one selling shinobi-worthy clothes and possibilities. As Naruto, he had never seen the inside of this store, most often as people didn't let him come this far anywhere in Konoha. Being able to look around and see there was indeed more than just an orange jumpsuit, he suspected the reason he had been gifted it was to keep a better eye on him. Not that it helped, as even with the jumpsuit, he was able to get away from the Anbu in broad daylight. Getting older, he had learned that blending in might be the better option at times. Looking at Indra, he could see the same thought going through his mind, so they settled on the Konoha blue, black, or green. As much as they wanted to stand out, their chakra would do that for them already. Nudging Kurama softly once he did his pickings, Asura went to try on some of them and get ready. Smiling as Indra did the same, the both of them looking at each other before laughing and pointing out what fit or did not. In the end, Indra was dressed in form-fitting pants in dark blue, a long-sleeved open shirt over that, followed by a hiyori in a slightly lighter blue. The pattern on it looked like lightning, something which had Asura grinning, knowing that Indra was still attached to the lightning Sasuke would use at one point. Asura, on the other hand, was wearing green, partly because of his status as a healer, but also because it had been the color of Yuzushio. Given that the Utsutsuki compound eventually became Yuzushiagakure, he felt it fitting. Wearing loose pants, which were fastened by bandages around his ankles, as well as a flowy kimono top with wide sleeves perfect for stitching in seals if he wanted to, closed by an obi which he put his satchel on. They both wore standard sandals, and a Konoha headband, although not around their head in clear sight. "We look good." Asura doesn't know what to say other than that. He and Indra did indeed look good. He didn't think he would ever feel this good in green, but he did. Kurama stretched from where he had been laying at Mikoto's feet, before using a chakra-aided jump to settle on Asura's shoulders again. Grinning at the kitsune, Asura shrugged and went to pay for his outfit, as well as order several others to be made so he had extra. Indra did the same thing after asking Mikoto something. When he came back, the Uchiwa was displayed on the collar of his shirt. Shrugging softly, it was clear that after wearing it for so long it felt weird not to wear it now. Given Mikoto's status as wife of the clan head, she would have the ability to give him the okay for something like that. Not that Fugaku would ever disagree, not after everything they had found out about them recently. Feeling ready to face whatever it was that would be thrown in their direction now, they took their leave from Mikoto, making their way to the Hokkage's office, very aware of the looks they were getting. The story would have made it through Konoha by now, the two strangers who were able to stop the Kyuubi. as well as the ones who revealed just what Danzo had done to Konoha and its allies. They were certain that the rumors would make it further in the world as well. The Sannin, as well as the other villages, would find out. The two of them were already planning on making their way out of Konoha and throughout the elemental nations. Zetsu needed to be dealt with as well, just like those out there who wouldn't want to get peace settled. How do you want to do this, Asura? Grinning, Asura started talking that he believed they needed to get to aim first. Nagato and Konan needed to be told what was going on. He already knew where they were, so it was easy to get to them and act on it. Additionally, while in aim, they could do away with the statue, so it would be a lot harder for others to try and resurrect the Jubai. Indra hummed, "I also remember you telling me about the third in their group, Yahiko." Nodding, Asura looked a little sheepish. "I had hoped between all of us we can resurrect him. Additionally, I can heal Nagato as he does need that. Using Rinnegan eyes, which are not his, took its toll on him." Shivering, Indra didn't want to think about what he did as Madara. Going back over it, both as an outsider and with his memories, that had to be the life where Zetsu had the most influence on him. It truly was an issue, and a have to go about cleaning up after that. Placing his hand on Indra's shoulder, Asura smiled softly. "These things happened, no matter how annoyed we get by them now. We'll fix it, we're here to fix it, Indra." Arriving at the Hawkage's office, they were let in by the Jounin stationed there, knocking once before entering to see Minato expecting them. A soft smile on his face before his gaze drifts to the couch in the corner of the room. Kushina was sleeping on it, baby Naruto on her chest as they both napped. Approaching the sleeping woman, Asura hovered a green glowing hand above her stomach before nodding at Minato. "She's healing well. I give it another couple of days before everything is back in order. She shouldn't be allowed back on missions until Naruto is 6 months, but I don't see any complications going for her." Minato sighed in relief before smiling again, mentioning for them both to sit. "I seem to remember the both of you needing to leave Konoha to do some things. Can you give me a rundown of what that is?" Exchanging looks, they started to explain Zetsu and the other hidden villages, as well as the conflicts he had a hand in. "We want to make sure those don't happen, that things like the Bloody Mist or the Akatsuki never get a chance to fully form. Right now, we're at an advantage in that things that happen now, we're already aware of. Zetsu doesn't think he's this close to being on the edge of failure. We can use that to our advantage, especially now that he doesn't have Abaido under his control anymore." The mention of his other male student had Minato sighing again. He had never expected for the masked person to be Abaido. But he had been restrained by Asura before the conditioning by Zetsu was undone. Right now, he was recuperating at the Uchiha main house to help him recover and to give him somewhere familiar. Kakashi was over just about every day, to the point that Minato was certain something was going on there. Turning his attention to the two in front of him, he nodded. "I know I can't stop you, but please keep me up to date as to what is happening, please. I'll try to do as much as possible in terms of opening Konoha for other hidden villages." His gaze rested on Kurama. "I think it would be best if Kurama went with you, Asura. He isn't made to be sealed in anyone. I see that now. However, I don't trust others to see that in the same light and not try." The Kitsune looked shocked at hearing that, before curling Thiter around Asura, who petted him gently. "I think that's a great idea, Minato-san. It will also help when we go and find out siblings, as I'm sure we'll run into them at one point or another." Chapter 8, Chapter Text. It was odd to be outside of Konoha again, but to still feel the subtle influence it had on them both. Given what they had been through, part of Indra and Asura had feared they would revert back to that state when Kaguya was active. To run and hide, as it was the only thing they were able to do for the longest time. Maybe it was Kurama there with them, or it was the general state of the world around them that helped to negate the flashbacks to what had been once before. Still, despite everything that was going on, it was clear that they were in a whole different world still. It was refreshing if nothing else. "You keep looking back, do you miss Konoha that much already?" Indra inquired, which had Asura blushing. Stammering, he takes a deep breath before speaking. "It's not that, It's just that I can still feel it. Maybe it's because Hashirama grew most of the forest covering Konoha, but I can feel it every step that we take. It's almost like it's beckoning me home. Sighing, he adds, it's almost like the compound in that regard. Otu-sama did tell us that given enough love, everything can become sentient. The compound loved us all, as I'm sure it grew to love the Uzumaki. I'm just surprised to note that Konoha is at that stage already. Kurama, who had kept quiet up until that point, spoke. The compound and Uzushio had Otu-sama pouring a lot of his chakra in. We all were also born there, let's not forget that. Konoha, on the other hand, was made by one of your reincarnations, which gives it a lot of power as well. You can't forget, Asura, that you and Indra aren't like normal humans. Pouting at that, seeing as he's well aware of this fact, Asura still can't help looking back now and again. He doesn't hear complaints from his older brothers, so that's a relief. They will be making good time anyway, stopping at Uzushio first to see what lays there. No doubt there will be ruin more than anything. Kushina mentioned she didn't know anyone being able to make it there since its fall. She mourned from Konoha, young as she was. Indra and Asura had another reason to go there, the same one Asura had used to get to Hashirama's belongings behind his portrait in the Hokage office. There were certain books in there he was certain he wouldn't find anywhere else. Additionally, there was also the belongings they had left in their family compound, as well as any and all belongings their father had sealed away before his death. Some of that knowledge, they were sure, would help them in the event of Zetsu managing to get through whatever plans they made. If, for whatever reason, there was another Utsutsuki coming to try and take them on. At least with that, the knowledge and attributes, they could take on whatever the world threw at them. The three of them, Kurama, Indra, and Asura, had been going over everything that had happened the last time. The things they had changed for now, and those moments they needed to watch out for when they happened. With those in Konoha, planning on whatever happened there. This meant that the three of them could go out and search for Zetsu, while diffusing situations that were catastrophic last time. Do you know what else you want to do, except pass by Uzu and aim, Asura? Smiling as he nodded at Kurama's question, he elaborated, right now there is no unity. Not in the villages and not in the Jinchuriki. Should something happen right now, we already lost, and I want to make sure we can prevent this. It can't be a coincidence that Madara tried to get Maido to seal you in her back then. The knowledge that he was willing to sacrifice an eye to get some of Hashirama's DNA proves that in my eyes. He knew what needed to happen, or did as Zetsu told him to in an effort to get to the Biju easier. Blinking at that, Indra nodded. That makes sense. He knew that as they were, he'd never be able to get to the Biju. But if they were sealed in humans, it would be something much easier. No one alive knows of the true power a Biju has. Killer Bee is close, or he will be close in a couple of years. But that leaves 1 out of 9 to be able to protect themselves. Some, like Gaara and Fu, are too young at the time, and that makes them easy pickings. It's clear to see that Indra's going over his memories from Madara, not that Asura doubts his hypophys. Both Indra and Madara had been emotional vulnerable when Zetsu made use of them, when he made them turn against their family for a power he couldn't give them. Asura still remembered the look in Madara's eyes when Kaguya released him, could see the utter devastation that had been wrought on the man in knowing that everything he had fought for had been a lie. Asura forgave him just as he had forgiven Indra, as he knew that Hashirama would forgive Madara. It was something hard to think about, what life would be if they weren't able to change so much, not that they needed to think too much about it. After all, Indra had mentioned before that this chance was one they would take and make sure to hold on to. We'll stop at Uzu on the way to aim. It shouldn't be too out of the way if I remember correctly. On top of that, we'll make sure that whatever is left from the Utsutsuki and the Uzumaki is taken care of. There will be enough that could be useful that we don't want to let Zetsu get his hands on. Part of the reason to go to Uzu was so nothing there could be used against them when Zetsu figured out something was wrong, as the pest would find out at one point. Indra and he had spoke about it, hoping to deal with the specter before that happened, but the chances were they wouldn't be able to do that. Gathering Uzu knowledge would at least make sure that pest wouldn't be able to get to it. They sank into silence after that, moving fast and seeing the threes thinning the closer they got to the sea. Once on the shore, they both took a deep breath of the salty air. I didn't think we'd be able to smell this again. Lots of things that seemed so normal before were a gift now that they knew what the outcome could be. Kaguya had made sure there was no life possible on Earth after she was done. They might have defeated her, but that didn't mean that they had won. Winning meant making sure it never happened again. Looking out over the water, they slowly places a foot on it, making their way in the general direction of Uzu. For others, it might have been hard to know where it was. But as they had grown up there, even if it hadn't been known as Uzu back then, it was like a beacon calling them home. Like she knew they were there again and couldn't wait to see her too. Once through the barrier surrounding Uzu, the first things they both noticed were the bodies all around. The people who had died protecting their village and those who had died trying to burn it to the ground. It wasn't easy seeing Uzu, Kumo, and Kiri Nin all around, knowing that none of these had been able to get the burial they deserved. As much as it ached to know that Kumo and Kiri had decimated their family compound, all the Nin here had done as ordered and nothing more. None of them deserved to be held accountable for that. As if sharing that thought, Kurama jumped off of his shoulders to grow to the size of a large dog, using his tails as limbs to gather the dead. Indra, who preferred not to touch dead people, went ahead to build pyres for those from Kumo and Kiri, and rafts for those from Uzu. So they could all be set aflame, on land or on the sea, and become one with the universe once more. The three of them worked for a couple of hours, finding body after body after body. Some of them seasons, Jonin, some newly minted Genin, and at times children still learning killed in their home to make sure the next generation didn't have a chance to blossom. It hurt to see, and it hurt to think that Zetsu no doubt had a hand in this too. He knew where the clan compound lay. It would be just for him to act like this to hurt them where it mattered most. I think that's the last of them, Asura whispered, his voice soft to honor the dead they had handled. Those from Kiri and Kumo, with the few Konoha nin scattered throughout, were placed on the pyres on shore, lit with a quick katten. Uzu nin were placed on the rafts and pushed into the sea before a long-range katten technique was used to set them on fire too. Almost as if this is what they were waiting for, it was like a fog lifted. Al is the dead here were finally given their peace. Bowing their head, they let them scatter to the wind, smiling softly at the notion that the people trapped here were set free. None of them would have even been in this situation if things had gone differently. That was on them more than anyone else. Ah, I never did think I would see you here, together at that. It's the voice that has them turning, on edge as this shouldn't be possible. Kurama's fur is standing up, while the tension in both Asura and Indra would be enough to cut a knife. There was no way that the voice they had heard was real. Yet as they turned around, there he was, their father. Translucent as he was, it was obvious he wasn't here in body. But that didn't take away that he was indeed here, looking at the three of them with that sweet smile on his face, the one they had all missed the most, Otu-sama. Kurama spoke, the eldest, and as such the one most on guard. The man nodded. My sons, I did not think I would see the day. Indra is on his knees in front of the man in an instant, bitter tears streaming over his cheeks as he does so. I am so sorry, Tusan, for what I did to your dream and to the world. Asura opens and closes his mouth before he too sinks to his knees. What we both did, instead of finding a way we destroyed so much. To the point, Zetsu is able to take over, and we know he'll manage to succeed if we don't interfere. A warm hand cupped their faces, not unlike their first life when they had been a whole lot younger. When their father's word had been the answer to everything, the same eyes that had looked at them then were looking at them now. My dear boys, you did everything you could do. It should be me who apologize profusely to the both of you. In trying to be fair, I set you up against the other when I wanted you both to see that you would work better together. He looks the both of them in the eyes one after the other, to see that you figured that out touched my heart so much. You will prevail, my sons, I know you will. Releasing the both of them, he turns to Kurama, And you, my eldest, I am glad you found a way back to yourself. I am sorry for the things you went through, although it eventually did lead you back to Asura. Kurama purred, grinning softly. It did, even if it took way too long. We're going to make sure the world remembers and that it stays in one piece. Hagamoto nodded. I know you will, I will be watching. Chapter 9, chapter text, it felt like appropriate, knowing that father was looking over them. Seeing him there, even if it was just as a ghost, felt like the closure they needed. Indra especially needed this. Ever since he and Asura got back all of their memories, it felt like he needed to let his old man know that he had fucked up. It was largely because of him that their vision for the future didn't come to pass. Indra's actions had led to a chain reaction where his and Asura's descendants would keep fighting up until Naruto and Sasuke. Even then, it took the world ending to change it all. Smiling softly as he looked at his brother, Asura put his hand on his shoulder. We're going to make sure things change from now on, Indra, you know we will. With a wry smile, Indra nodded. I know, but I needed this too. I needed Otu-sama to know that I will do better. Pulling him close with the hand still on his shoulder, Asura hugs his older brother. Feeling Kurama join the hug as much as he could while in such a smaller form. It felt good to know they wouldn't be alone in this. Their father was watching over them, had taken the time to talk to each of them, to impact his wisdom, which they all needed right now, before he let them know where everything would be. Both the treasures of old from their time, as well as the Uzumaki vaults and safes. It was high time that these would be put to good use. Once that was over, their father faded away again, although, now that they knew, it was clear that his chakra remained, always there to watch over them. Kurama jumped down from where he was standing on their shoulders, stretching before making his way towards the center of Uzushio. Let's go and see what we can find. Exchanging glances with each other, Indra and Asura follow the kitsune. They too are wondering what is in store for them. Some vague memories tell them what to expect from the Utsutsuki side of things, but outside of those mentions, Kushina has made they have no idea what the Uzumaki left behind. Now that the bodies were gone, it was easy to see that Uzushio was very different from their family's compound. Not that surprising, as a lot of time had passed. It still looked amazing, though, if abandoned. Everything indicated that it had been a well-loved village. One knows for being a shinobi only who traded with nearby civilian settlements to get what they needed. The village showed that, being sturdy and made for easy access in and out of buildings. It's so different. Asura couldn't help but whisper as he looked around. He loved how the village evolved. A part of him glad that after they died their compound wasn't left to go to ruin. Indra hummed, I quite like it, it feels right. Giggling at that, Asura couldn't help it. Indra had always said the compound felt constrictive. As such, it was why he left as soon as their father came with his challenge. A part of Asura had been certain Indra wouldn't return so fast. To hear him saying that he found it feeling right made it clear this is how it should have been. A shove from his older brother had Asura laughing even louder. Not for the first time happy that they had this second chance. Knowing what had happened, and in a way being three people all at the same time, but still realizing that they were right where they needed to be. Kurama also laughed. His eyes were soft as he looked at the two of them. If you had told me a year ago you would both be back, I wouldn't have believed you. It's so very comforting to see a scene from ages ago. His tails flicked around him before he suddenly stopped. There is something here. In front of the kitsune was a large building, not unlike the cage tower in Konoha. The difference was the sign on the front of the building. The Uzumaki spiral was obvious, making them enter cautiously. Keeping their eyes open for everything that they could sense, there was indeed something here, but it didn't seem to be alive. Asura stepped forward first, gasping as he opened the door to what seemed to be the Uzukage's office. That wasn't what made him gasp, though. It was the sight of past Uzukages, standing there not unlike their father had showed up. Ghosts for certain, but none as clear as Hagoromo had been. Halt, who goes there? One of them steps forward. The man looking exactly like Kushina did, making it clear that this was her father. For all that he wasn't just Naruto anymore, Asura felt as if having this chance was so unreal. Stepping forward, he bowed his head, making sure that his headband was in clear sight. Smiling softly as they all settled down, "We came here to honor those that are left behind. Kushinaheim would have loved to be here, but as she has recently given birth, that isn't the best thing to do right now." The man who had spoken gaped. I have a grandchild?" Smiling softly, Asura nodded. "A little boy named Naruto, the son of Konoha's Yondaime and Kushinaheim. He is well, as is she." At this, they noticed Kurama standing next to them, their eyes widening as they took in the Biju out of his cage. The man who had spoken before shook his head. "You lie, as that beast is free. Kushina was sent to Konoha, to my aunt, to become its next Jinchuriki." Feeling a vain pulse on his forehead, Asura glared at the people who were both his ancestors and his descendants. "Kurama is not in it. He's a sentient being, just like you and I are." The fact that Mairo-sama made herself the first Jinchuriki only played in the plans of another to recall the Jubai. Despite doing what she believed to be best at the time, it made a lot of things harder over the years. Sighing, he looked away. "Kushina is fine. I examined her myself, giving her a live chakra transfer to deal with the strain of losing Kurama. She might not be the shinobi she once was, but she won't be dying anytime soon." One of the other Yuzukage spoke. "That's impossible. You can't just do a live chakra transfer. There are too many variables to account for." Asura shrugged. Just as Indra and Kurama said, Asura doesn't know the meaning of impossible. Flushing at hearing his older brothers say that, Asura looked away, well aware that he did indeed not know the meaning of impossible. Able to make miracles happen in every life and in every way. Still, it felt odd to suddenly be the special one, before it had been Indra who gathered all the attention. But now that had shifted to Asura. "Asura, were you names after one of our founders, young one?" a voice asked. The Yuzukage stepped aside, before a man stepped forward and gaped when he saw Asura standing there. Asura, likewise, couldn't help but stare at the man before he smiled sadly. "I should have known it was you who settled down here, Yasuke." It was odd to see his son standing here before him. Last time Asura had seen him, he'd been just shy of a teenager. Seeing him standing there also made it clear that he and Indra, while utterly failing their family, had managed to inspire a new generation to do certain things. Tusan, how? It was clear Yasuke didn't know how to act now. The other Uzumaki heads and Yuzukage standing there seemed to come to terms with what was happening in front of them, no matter how impossible it seemed. Shaking his head, Asura sighed. "It's a long story. Essentially, our feud never stopped, even after we died. Both OS were reborn, again and again, until our last lives where we happened to be the only one left after an outside force wiping everything out. We're here to put a stop to that, by any means necessary. Coming here was something we felt we needed to do, as I was one of the last Uzumaki in my last life. Not only that, but given this is where the compound once stood, it felt appropriate. Given time, the other Uzumaki seemed to realize who was standing in front of them. Even if they looked at Yasuke in awe as well, it wasn't that far-fetched that his son had made a name for himself when settling here. Despite not sporting the red hair Uzumaki would become known for, it is clear he has the chakra reserves for it. Naruto's grandfather steps forward. "How did you even manage that, to travel in time or in space? It doesn't seem like it's possible." Snorting at that, Indra repeats that Asura never did know the meaning of the word. Kurama and Yasuke laugh at it too. Kurama goes so far as to add, "The Nidaime Hawkage had a space-time jutsu, and I know the Yondaime perfected it to the point that he still is the fastest shinobi alive right now. He is even faster than I am, not that I am all that keen on thinking back how we found that one out." Shivering, no doubt thinking back about what had happened the night this Naruto was born. Asura placed his hand on Kurama's head, trying to soothe him in whatever way he could. He didn't like thinking back about that night either, what could have been lost for one, as well as the possibility of what might have happened if they didn't go back to that exact moment. Abaito never deserved everything that happened to him. Being free of Zetsu's hold was a relief. but he would have a long way to go before he was back on his feet. For all that Asura had done to help him, there was only so much chakra could do. Between Kakashi, Minato, and Kushina, as well as the Uchiha clan, they were certain it would happen. The only remaining questions was when. Sighing, Asura frowned. We didn't really have any other choice. Kaguya made sure there was nothing left. We could have stayed, but again, there was nothing left, so it wouldn't be for long. Looking at his brother, he added, Indra was the one who proposed we go back. We try and fix what we can in any way we think we can manage. Not caring about the timeline, as that already went to shit the moment we went back. Indra blushed. We needed to do something, and as much as I love you, Atauro, I don't think I could manage another reincarnation circle to deal with this all. Kurama pipped up, if there even was any, seeing as you both were the last ones around and not yet fathering any children. Yelping at the comment, Asura looked away. He hadn't even thought about it for so long. Naruto and even Hashirama had moment they longed for children. The latter eventually had 2 and several grandchildren among them, Tsunade. But Naruto never managed to get that far. He had dreamed about it once when he was still crushing on Sakura, but it became clear quickly that they wouldn't be compatible like that. Explaining as much as they were able to, adding that they wanted to get to knowledge thought lost for themselves and for Kushina. Mentioning that, as this was indeed a second chance, they were pulling out all the stops. Asura started grinning, rather fox-like. I also need to have a probable cause as to why I suddenly know so much sealing. There was reason the world was so scared of Uzumaki. I do like to make sure they remember that fear. Chapter 10, chapter text, leaving Uzushio was done with a somewhat mixed feeling. For all 3 of them, this had been their home at one point in life. Knowing that once more they were going to let nature run its course felt odd. Slowly walking away over the waves, looking back now and again, almost feeling the island mourning them. In a way it would mourn them, they could feel the chakra in the earth, the way that all those chakra-heavy people having lived there had influenced it in a way. They were all sad to go, but staying on a ghost island wouldn't bring them anything. Not with Zetsu still running around, as much as it hurt to leave there were other things they needed to do now. So, Asura pondered, Kiri or aim. Humming, Indra looks towards water country. From what Abaito told us it's aim that we should pass by first. There is an Uzumaki there, after all, someone who has been used for so long. There is something sad in his voice that has Asura moving closer. It isn't your fault, Indra. No matter what did or did not happen, in this life or a previous one, Nagato would have gone through all of this. It's sadly the way things had to be. He'll come out of it stronger, I know he will. Grinning, he adds, additionally, seeing as we're screwing the timeline anyway. Between we acting as a battery and your Rinnegan, we can bring Yahiko back, and they don't have a reason to follow Zetsu still. We know better than anyone that the best has a way of getting under people's skin. Nagato and Konan were grieving with everything that was going on. Danzo has been dealt with, and I'm sure Hanzo's henchmen won't pose a problem anymore either. All we need to do is swoop in and show them the error of their ways. Kurama, lounging on Asura's shoulders once again, mentioned, or you lock them into a room with Asura, that seems to have helped with a lot of things. Flushing at the laughter from his older brothers, Asura can't help but agree with them there. Most of the things that happened did so because he didn't give up. As Hashirama and as Naruto, his voice had been his strongest weapon, even if he had used it wrong at the start of his life as Naruto. Looking back now, there were so many other things he could have been doing. In a way, he hoped that this version of him, this Naruto, was able to find that sooner. Indra grinned, once more highlighting just how he had changed over the years. For the longest time, Indra had been someone who was left to deal with a lot of strain. Not made easier by Zetsu, finding him time and time again to set him up against Asura. Right now, that wasn't an issue any longer, but if that pest hadn't been there, so many instances could have been avoided altogether. It was this knowledge that had Asura agreeing with Indra on going back, on having another chance, and just making sure they would come out of this stronger. Let's go and change the world. Asura cheered before he started running over the water. They would move over the mainland of Fire Country to get there. Nagato, while strong, wasn't a natural user of the Rinnegan. Whatever he wanted to do, Indra would be able to do so much better. Kurama took a head start, which, given that he was a being aimed from chakra, wasn't that surprising. The way he was the size of a small house probably also helped there. Indra and Asura followed close by, giggling as if they were children, suddenly back before everything went to hell and back, hoping that in time they could make sure that the world realized most of the things that did happen didn't need to happen like this. -0 to 0 to 0, it wasn't getting into aim that was the problem. Being who they were, they had more than enough ways of making sure they wouldn't be tracked by the rain that Nagato used to keep an eye on the works around him. In a way, it was a smart move, if it was for anyone but them. Indra, never one liking the cold, used a small-range fire chakra to keep them all warm in this climate, making sure to hide their headbands for now. Danzo might not be around anymore, but despite what he knew, it wouldn't be surprising to know that the man had his hand in more than one pot during his lifetime. "This is depressing," Indra whispered, to which Asura could only nod. All around them were people, but they looked dead. Their eyes did not hold life anymore. Given what had happened to AIM, even before the wars and Hanzo taking over, they hadn't been in a good spot either way. If things had gone differently, the Akatsuki would have been able to realize so much more for their goal. Stretching out his senses, it wasn't hard to find Nagato and Konan. Both of them were in what had to be the cage tower, hidden away and still able to overlook everything around them. Word would reach them soon enough, they were sure, but it would be too late by then. Stepping inside, Asura got them where they had to be without even being noticed by the shinobi around them. Again, the part of Thel being dead did them justice. It hurt to know that people would be so lost that they looked like that. The way Indra took a hold of his hand helped there, allowing his brother to lead him on and away from those zombified humans out there. Kurama, now smaller again, curled around his neck like a fluffy scarf. It helped to ground him, to make sure that despite everything going on they would work together and get an end to everything happening here. Stepping into the office, it felt odd to see Nagato in his walker again. He looked just as sickly as Asura remembered from Naruto. Holding on to the edge of life because of the eyes that weren't his own in the end. Who goes there? Konan was in motion not long after, putting herself in between Nagato and the invaders, not knowing what to do now. Yahiko, or the puppet made from his corpse, also appeared, although that wasn't something they feared. Taking a step forward as well, Asura knew that Kurama had been spotted by the way the two AIM nin's eyes widened. "Don't even think about it. We didn't come all this way for that." "Whatever you've been told, it isn't the truth," Nagato hissed. "How would you know?" Smiling sadly, Asura spoke, "Because it sounds too good to be true, because that's what it is. There is nothing going on that Zetsu told you that will make Yahiko come back. He's using that to make you into his next puppet because he knows he needs those eyes you carry. There is never any sympathy in that being, nor does he want to help. If anything, he wants to make sure humans are dealt with so he doesn't have to deal with them anymore." They can see the look Konan directs to Nagato, so the only woman had her doubts. That was good to know. She had been kind, from what Naruto had experiences, and she didn't deserve the end she had gotten. Although in a way, it brought them all together, so that might be the best thing. Indra draws their attention, which is why they gasp at the sight of his Rinnegan. The way Nagato seems too shocked to even move works to their advantage. An opening Asura takes, as he moves quickly to stop at the Uzumaki's side and presses a hand to his chest, his head tilted to the side, as he allows his own pure chakra to flow into Nagato. The scuffle behind them makes it clear that Indra has a hold on Konan, even as she yells out, "What are you doing?" Smiling softly, Asura looks at his clansman, or rather, Naruto's clansman, knowing that the redhead realizes what is going on. "Don't worry, Konan, they are restoring my chakra flow." Looking at Asura, he adds, "You must be a very great healer." Kurama is the one who answers. The very best even, healed the Uzumaki clan head too, after everything that happened with the birth and my extraction. It's clear that they had not been expecting Kurama to speak. The way Nagato's eyes widened and his mouth opened to gape at the kitsune. Conan stopped her struggling, but the quick talking from Indra shows that he is explaining things to the blue-haired woman. Shaking his head, Asura pulls back his hand, before opening up Nagato's walker and helping him to step out of it. Taking it easy, one step at a time, before helping the man to sit down for the first time in years. Conan is at his side a second later, letting her eyes roam over him and sobbing in relief at the notion that she didn't lose him too. Exchanging a look, Indra and Asura clear their throat before explaining what it is that they were there to do. Explaining what Zetsu really wanted and how he uses that to sell to those that are desperate enough to listen. Eventually also telling Nagato just whose eyes he has in his eye socket and how Konoha is opening their doors to them. Kushina is clan head still, and Jiraiya would be over the moon at the notion that his pupil survived. With a nod at Indra, Asura extends his hand to his brother. Before the telltale power of the Rinnegan beams, and Yahiko is standing in front of them instead of the puppet corpse he had been. Looking lost before his eyes fall on Conan and Nagato, embracing them both before they turn as a unit to look at the Utsutsuki brothers. Thank you for everything. It becomes clear that Yahiko had been the leader before everything went down. The orange-haired man taking the lead, chewing out his partners for what they had done with the Akatsuki before he hugged them close. They would make their way to Konoha, so that aim could heal as well. Having anticipated for that, Asura took out a letter he had asked Kushina to write, stating that any and all Uzumaki were welcome in Konoha under her clan. Minato had been too happy to agree, wanting to keep the peace and knowing what came of an unhappy Uzumaki. The addition of more power to Konoha also helped. Uzumaki were never weak after all, renowned for their dense chakra and larger-than-average reserves. They all stay one more night before leaving in the morning. Nagato, Conan, and Yahiko moving towards Konoha at a steady pace, while Asura, Indra, and Kurama were making their way to Suna. While Kiri had been on the agenda, without Abaito there to influence Yagura, they shouldn't fear the bloody mist. Additionally, if his calculations were correct, Gaara should be born right about now. His mother died in childbirth before, but with Asura, their things would go different too. Once out of sight, Asura grins. Maybe it's a good thing that some people already know or this would go downhill so fast. Snorting, Indra shook his head. Not only that, but there is a reason why Kurama and I were all over putting them all in a room with you, you know. I wouldn't even doubt it, seeing as you did such a good job bringing me to my senses. Yelping at that, Asura couldn't help but shake his head. Things were indeed changing. Zetsu hadn't been dealt with yet, but there was a large change. The coward had gone to ground. They wouldn't be able to get to him yet. But they will. All they needed to do now was make sure there were no areas he could gain the upper hand. The world was changing, as it should be. Chapter 11, chapter text. It felt odd, knowing they had been away from Konoha for 2 years now. After AIM, they had set out to visit all the other villages which had a Biju. Given what they knew would happen, there were those that took priority, even if Kiri wouldn't be in such a situation anymore with Abaito in Konoha. It became clear that some things would always remain the same. The tension between the different villages stayed, not being helped with conflict or almost conflict that had riddled the past few years. Stubborn people in charge meant that they weren't easy to persuade to look at things from a different perspective. Often too lost in the way they had maintained for so long that nothing else mattered for now. Wearing a Konoha headband didn't help in that regard either. They had been prepared for that. Even when they were more than just random Konoha nin, there were sensitivities between villages, especially paired with Konoha. But this was bigger than the villages divided. There was a treat on the horizon, one they all needed to be aware of even if they didn't want to hear or see it at the start. Konoha and Konoha nin still weren't a happy sight for the likes of Kumo and Iwa. Their loss at the hands of Konoha was still fresh and made it difficult to get an edge. Not that they let that stop them, stubborn to a fault until they managed to at least speak to the one in charge. Asura grinned, even surrounded by Anbu or a honor guard. What's like without a little challenge? Kurama and Indra would shake their head, well aware that Asura had a wholly different outlook on life. He could walk into danger without any care and come out of there unscathed. People never seemed to believe him at first, but they turned around sooner rather than later. They had time after all, and most nin never did know what to do at the sight of Kurama, outside of the seal and almost docile. Even worse was getting to see the cage, as often they were brought straight to a holding cell that would never be able to hold them for long. If there was one thing the both of them learned, it was patience, which came in handy when sitting there until a cage or the Anbu came to collect them. Silently laughing at the way people didn't seem to get a grasp on them, on edge by both Kurama and the way Indra and Asura didn't mind just waiting. But they managed, especially when Asura spoke. It became easier when they did establish that while they were Konoha nin, that wasn't what they were there for. The notion that someone, or rather something, was out there wanting to collect the Biju to call upon the Yuyubai was shocking enough. No one believed them at first, thinking they were trying to sow unrest and panic. Until either a Jinchuriki was collected, or someone took the time to listen to the three of them. Kurama, still loose, trotting next to Asura, also had more than a few people looking back at them. Eyes almost falling out of their heads when he talked, huffing when they called him a beast. Grinning as Asura scolded whoever called him a beast. Enjoying a chance to catch up with his siblings when their Jinchuriki was persuaded to join the conversation. It felt nice, seeing them all again. Asura could use his chakra connection to them all to pull their siblings and their Jinchuriki to a shared mind space. Stunning most Jinchuriki at the sight of their Biju, at a loss for words at their siblings in front of them. Kurama loved lording it over all of them that he was the oldest, even if he melted just the same after being buried under several hugs. While he didn't admit it, it was clear he had missed his siblings something fierce. That shared mind space made it easier to show what was to come, or an altered version of it anyway. Not everyone needed to know that they had traveled through time and space, but they still needed to be warned about Zetsu. A name that had all the Biju hissing and spitting at hearing it, even worse when they found out that being was indirectly responsible for them being sealed within humans. Sighing, Asura shook his head. It's easier to capture a Jinchuriki and pull you out of there than it is to catch you all in your true form. Chakra constructs as you are, he'd never be able to capture you fully, which is what he needed. More than one of the Jinchuriki felt sick at that, at knowing why they had been chosen. Even if their village, nor Hashirama, had known what their actions would mean for the world. Given their close dealing with them, it brought upon quite a lot of friendships with those old enough to understand what was going on. Gaara and Fu, for example, were too young, but were happy to have some positive interactions in their life. People who understood and who were willing to listen. It also helped that Asura had been there, in time to help Gaara's mother to give birth to him. Premature as he was, making it easier for Rasa and his family to accept the new addition to their family. Some of his council didn't like the closeness of Konoha nin with the Kazekage family, but they were quickly shut up in the sense that there was no actual gain to be had for Konoha. At least not in the way they feared. Several history lessons later, and most of the Kages, and their closest confidants were aware of how chakra came to be and what would happen if they lost it. Putting in an extra effort to stop that from happening, and to work together even if it was Konoha that shared this with the world. Additionally, it did give them an in with most Jinchuriki. Their Biju, at least those in contact with the beast inside them, were in awe at seeing what was happening in front of them. Even more so once it became clear who Asura and Indra were in the greater view of things. Sharing the history also meant naming themselves, which had people connecting the dots sooner rather than later. When the question of how was asked, Indra and Kurama, as well as any Biju currently present, would answer, Asura is stubborn to a fault and doesn't know how to quit. Given what they had been told, more than one person backed off of the living legends in front of them. More than willing to listen to what it is that they wanted for the world, even more so when they had both their cage and several very powerful nin on their side. One could twist it however they wanted. Jinchuriki were a weapon of mass destruction. Let it be known that the Raikage didn't react well to his brother hugging Konoha nin all of the sudden, even if everyone else found it funny. Juki had been inconsolable and didn't know how to deal with this, but he had been happy to see Kurama again and to know that change was coming. Did you think we would have succeeded if we were any other person? Asura couldn't help but ask Indra once they could see the gates of Konoha. Both Indra and Kurama looked at the younger with wide eyes, taking the time to look at each other before turning back to Asura. No. Smiling, Asura should have suspected as much. They had told him more than once that the world would be a much better place if they managed to get all the Kage into a room with Asura to talk to them. More than once that had been suggested when it became clear that people listened to him. Indra especially could see why Asura had been the heir once upon a time. He was just so much more set on building bridges and making sure that what he worked for now would still be there years from now. Kurama and Asura had to pull him out of his flunk more than once in an effort to make him see that these were things of the past. Saying their goodbyes in Suna, where they had stopped one last time before making their way back to Konoha. Checking in on Gaara as a way to honor the bond that would be there between him and Naruto at one point. Asura was certain he could pitch the idea to Minato and Kushina, give them a reason to foster better relationships between Kage families. Arriving at Konoha, it was unexpected to see a Kumo diplomat leaving the gates, until they noticed that something didn't quite add up. The way the man walked, as well as the unusually heavy bag, set them off. Kurama was the one who acted, as he saw his brothers tense while not knowing what to do. Jumping in front of the man, which made him startle and release that which he had been holding, which happened to be Hinata. Stepping forward to pick up a disoriented Hyuga heiress. Indra had the Kumo diplomat in a genjutsu before something else could be said, asking Kurama to let Jiwuki or Matatabi know. They could tell as it didn't seem in his nature to try and steal a child from another village after everything that had been shared between them all. This is going to be fun, Indra snorted as Asura said that, still remembering the fallout of this event between their fellow Konoha nin. Neji never did get over the death of his father, even if he and Hinata restored their relationship. To know that nothing like that would happen, it helped in seeing that things were indeed changing. Once entering the gates, it became clear that the village was on high alert. At the sight of the two of them, as well as Kurama, returning with the Kumo diplomat and Hinata, it seemed like the world stopped spinning for a second. Itachi was in front of them in a second. Shisui is getting senpai and Hokage-sama, how is she? Shifting a slightly green-glowing hand, Asura smiled. She's going to be just fine. I'm working through whatever it was he used on her, from the feel of it a mild paralysis poison. Am I to assume that someone went to gather Hyuga as well? Instead of an answer, the man in question appeared with his twin brother, Minato and Kakashi, following suit with Shisui and Abaido bringing up the rear. All of them in awe at what was happening, before they noticed who it was that was home again. A smile appearing on Minato's face, even if it became very icy at the sight of the Kumo diplomat. His eyes ran over Indra and Kurama, seemingly happy with what he saw, as he nodded. I'm sure I had been informed by now. Kurama nodded, before Asura took a step forward to give Hinata to her father. She's going to be just fine, a little shaken of course. But nothing a little rest and fluids won't solve, Hyuga. The man bowed shallowly. Thank you, Asura-sama. I'll make sure she is well taken care of at home. May we call on you if the need arises? Smiling, Asura nods. Of course, I should be at the Uzumaki compound should you have need for me. If possible, Minato started smiling even wider, stepping forward to hug Asura and Indra, before even patting Kurama on the head, as Kakashi and Abaido took the diplomat away. They should accept company soon enough, if ONB were made aware of the situation. Hovering near Asura, they both looked on at Itachi, and Shisui hugged Indra close before dragging him to the Uchiha compound. Waving at his brother, Asura grinned at Minato as he let the blonde lead him towards the Uzumaki compound, which given everything should be quite filled by now. Chapter 12, Chapter Text. Stepping into the Uzumaki compound, Asura became aware that he had no recollection of having entered it before. When he was Naruto, there hadn't been anything left when he realized his connection to the clan. Pain had wiped it all away, and with no recognized connection to the clan, it hadn't been rebuilt. With Jiraiya gone and Tsunade in a coma, no one had mentioned that to him either, so there was no one to mention it to him. Hashirama had been there once, back when the compound had just been built. Back when Mito had only just arrived and Uzashio delegates were numerous. He had never lived there though, only ever visited. It was so long ago that he couldn't remember half of it. Looking around, a soft smile appeared on Asura's face when he noticed that the architecture looked like the one in Uzu. The same building style, and just general feel, which was very different from Konoha and Fire Country. It felt like home right off the bat, enough that his smile became more genuine the deeper he walked into the compound. Minato was still at his side, a serene smile on his face as well, obviously right at home here. Kushina wants to hug you, just so you know. We were rather happy in our home, but with all the Uzumakis you came across during the 2 years you were gone. There was a need for a compound once more. There is a far-away look in the Hokage eyes. There is something else there, but it doesn't get spoken. Turning to Asura, he adds, I still remember the look on her face when we heard that Uzashio was decimated. The loss, I don't think I'll ever forget it. You helped in making it easier among all the other things you and Indra did for Konoha and the world. Giving her back family she had been certain she would never see again. It's healing her in a way I didn't think possible. It's obvious that it still impacts Minato a great deal, clanless as he was. Kushina's had been his family for so long. To know that there were others out there, that there was more to them than his wife and son, it seemed to help as well. It made him stronger, willing to protect more than just Konoha. Laughing at that, Asura shook his head. They needed a home, and were working towards world peace, so this seemed like the best thing to do. I know that I should have let you know, but smiling sheepishly, he added, I always wanted a family. Before everything went down, I guess a part of me is being selfish in making sure those that need it get it too. Times are different now, and I know Kushina is clan head, so they have a safe haven here as long as she or one of her descendants live in Konoha. All Minato does at hearing that is smile, patting him on the back and leading him further into the compound still. His silent agreement lingering around them. Easing the air between the two of them and making Asura grin all that brighter at already seeing the changes he and Indra had implemented. At least until a door opens and Kushina steps out, her eyes sparkling as she sees Asura standing there. Her purple eyes zeroing in on him, intent, but also so very warm and bright. Naruto, held on her hip, looks up too, bright eyes zeroing in on Asura as a toothy grin came to his face, seemingly knowing from his mother that seeing him was a very good thing. It felt weird to see himself, or a version of himself, staring at him. As a child, Asura hadn't known what to think of himself. In between the memories of Hashirama and Naruto, he didn't know what to make of his own childhood. To see a Naruto that was obviously happy and loved, it healed a part inside of him that he didn't even know was broken. When Naruto reached out, Asura was taking a hold of the toddler before he knew what he was doing. Blinking before he smiled softly at the little blonde boy. Hello, Naruto. What he gets back is a beaming smile and a giggle before Naruto is looking at his parents. Both who are grinning at the two of them, it feels familiar. Like something he should have had, or maybe something he had when he was still only Asura. Shaking his head, Asura lets it rest, placing Naruto on his hip and turning to Minato and Kushina, finding the redhead hugging him close when he turns towards her. Thank you. Blinking once, Asura frowns, you're welcome. Kushina laughs, you brought my clan here, after all this time that I thought I was the only one you lead them to me even without being in Konoha. I had to open up the clan compound again, in fact, we're getting close to being full with it all. Blinking again, Asura didn't know what to say to that. In part, it was to deal with his own childhood as Naruto, and how he didn't want anyone else to go through what he did. On the other hand, he knew that people like Nagato and Karin wanted a family, so why not make sure they had one? Shrugging, he shook his head, you all deserve it, I couldn't leave them there. Nagato, Konan and Yahiko have been without a family for so long. In between you and Jiraiya, this is a double connection to Konoha, so that seemed logical to send them here. His face darkened as he thought about Karin, her mother and grandmother. Aided by what Indra had told him once upon a time, he wanted to make sure the girl had family growing up. Even at just over 3 years old, she had seen too much. Her mother and grandmother had started crying when Asura found them and mentioned Kushina being alive. They were sucking them dry, literally. Apparently, Kaya-san was trained as a healer, making her work at the hospital in hopes of helping those that had taken them in after the fall. But they were using her potent chakra and healing abilities for themselves. I healed them as much as I was able to, but they couldn't stay there. It's obvious that Kushina is just as disgusted by that as he had been, her eyes dark as she mentioned hearing something about that. But none of the women wanting to elaborate on there. Now I can see why. They were so used to fight for scraps that they were scared something would have happened here too. I can't believe someone would do that. Turning to her husband, her eyes narrowed. You better never try something like that, Minato. The blonde held his hands up in a universal I surrender motion, shaking his head as he did so. You know I would never, Kushina. Your clan is my clan. There is nothing in this world that would make me turn on family. Huffing, Kushina nodded, before taking a hold of Naruto when he reached out for her. I'll go and have a talk with them, just to be sure. Asura, Nagato mentioned wanting to meet you when you passed by. I'm sure you can find him. Nodding at that, Asura waved at Naruto before he let himself feel out Nagato and make his way out there. Kurama staying close to him, where the kitsune had been all the time, happy to just look out and see what had been going on. I take it Juuki is aware of what happened, he asked the kitsune. A large smile overtook his fury face. He does, B wasn't impressed, mentioning he would let her know as soon as possible. I'm quite sure they'll be knocking on the gates before the end of the day. Snorting, Asura couldn't quite get why that Kumo delegate thought it a good idea to take a Hyuga from their compound. He was aware that Konoha had the most doijutsu users, but then again, they had been in fire country for ages now. Given the tentative truce that was going on, it could have ended in a war, which was the last thing any of them wanted. Minato, who was still standing there, cursed. Before a flash of yellow light made it clear he was going back to his office to make sure his shinobi were aware of who would come knocking sooner rather than later. Chuckling with a grin, Asura approached one of the houses in the compound. Finding that the door was opened before he could knock, Nagato grinning where he was standing to invite him in. It felt odd, but at the same time so right. Stepping in, it was clear to see that Nagato, Yahiko and Konan had found their home here. Despite their reluctance to thrust Konoha in, it seemed that, while they didn't know how to cope with Konoha, they did know how to deal with another Uzumaki. It was clear from the look of awe in Nagato's eyes, not knowing how to deal with everything that had happened. The possibility of still having a family when his own parents had been killed when he was so young, family realted by blood that accepted his partners as well. It seemed to be something he could only dream of. Knowing that he had helped to get them all here, that with everything going on he and Indra, as well as Kurama, did whatever they wanted to help those dear to them. It felt good, it felt like a step in the right direction. One where they could all lean on each other and work towards a possibility where no matter what there was something there to back you up. But they were starting to see that. The light in their eyes and the way their shoulders were less tense told him as much. Taking a seat with Kurama curling up in his lap, they talked about so many things that came up. In part, how they were settling into Konoha, and how Asura and Indra had been traveling. There was quite a lot to talk about, even more so when Nagato admitted to being in awe at the way Indra used his Rinnegan. I plan on training with it, even more than I already did. I know it isn't mine originally, but I do want to make sure I can use it as if it was mine from birth, he said proudly. Konan and Yahiko looking just as excited. Asura grins, wanting to add something when there is a knock at the door, and Indra enters from where he had been at the Uchiha compound. A smile appearing on his face at seeing them, even more so when Nagato repeats what he had said, even asking for help from Indra to train his Rinnegan. Exchanging looks with his brother, Asura shrugs, We were planning on staying here anyway, might as well find things to fill the time with. I know Kushina will probably rope me into helping out here, so why not? That got them even more joyous reactions, with Nagato mentioning they had to tell Kushina they wouldn't be leaving again unless for short missions. Or that had been the plan until Kakashi Hound appeared in full Anbu getup to ask for their presence at the Hawkage Tower. Apparently, A and B, with a delegation of their nin, had appeared to apprehend the person trying to work against their cage. While they couldn't see his face, it was clear that Kakashi was grinning. He seems pissed that someone was acting on his behalf and screwing it up royally when it was more than clear what he was working towards. I do believe I even saw him sweating bullets at the mention of you and Indra-sama being here, Asura-sama. Chapter 13, chapter text following Kakashi towards the gates where A and B were waiting, clearly agitated but civil in a way that only a cage could be. Yujiro was there too, which was a surprise but not an unwelcome one. Minato was also waiting there, grinning when Asura and Indra appeared. "I thought it best to let you know," the V-blonde said, the look in his eyes making it clear he wanted to make sure there was no double crossing. Which, given what had happened, was more than reasonable. I didn't even react to that. Even if the man had noticed what was going on, he just sighed and nodded at them all. Asura grinned at B and Yujiro in the meantime, allowing Kurama, who had been on his shoulders again, to get off. Laughing at the started yelps when people saw him grow as he walked forward. Coming to sit next to Asura with his eyes fixed on the Kumo delegation, none of them were aware of someone being here, Hawkage. In fact, Juuki cursed quite colorful when I mentioned it to him, as neither he nor B had been aware of someone even being sent to Konoha at this point in time. Minato frowned at that, taking out the note the other man had been carrying, handing it to it to look over. The way his brow frowned made it clear that this was an official Reikage document, but not one he had written. His eyes went to Asura before going to Minato. Would it be all right to see this Kumo envoy? With as many people as you want to join, Hawkage Dono. Curiosity piqued, Asura looked at his brother before glancing at A and Minato, seeing the way both cages were looking at each other. Eventually, Minato agreed, his eyes going to Asura to have him join, which the man did. They all did, Indra taking up the rear to talk to B and Yujiro so they wouldn't be felt left out. Chances were neither Jinchuriki would be allowed to come inside of the holding cells, but as long as Indra stayed outside, those in the known knew everything would be all right. Once inside of the Hawkage Tower, their group was divided, with A, Minato, Asura, and a squad of both Kumo and Konoha Anbu following. All of them highly interested in what this Kumo nin had to say for himself in the face of his cage. Kurama, after a moment of consideration, stayed with Indra, B, Yujiro, and Kakashi, settling at his brother's feet as he started to ask B and Yujiro how they all were. It was to the sound of that conversation that Asura left the room and made his way to the holding cells next to Minato. The deeper they went, the more obvious it became that something was going on by the tension all around them. Once in front of the cell, the Kumo nin looked shocked at seeing A there. Reikage-sama, he chalked out, looking around as if he wanted to know if this was a joke or not. A, on his turn, scoffed, "I should have knows, let me guess. One of my elders told you to do what you did. No doubt telling you that it was a wrong move on my part to agree to a truce with Konoha." His words came out harsh, as if he couldn't help but think himself inadequate. Hearing what he said, it wouldn't be too out there to think that other elders didn't agree with the direction the world was going. Even if Indra and Asura were much older than they didn't look like it. Tilting up an eyebrow as the man in the cell tried to talk his way out of this, against his own cage even, was something special. Asura didn't know if this was how people evolved to lie to the person, who was in essence their leader in every sense of the word. Cages were dictators, their word was law, so for someone to take the word of someone not their cage and try to talk their way out of it wasn't a smart thing to do. Holding up his hand, A sneered at the man, "You disrespected your cage by doing what you believed needed to be done. Even when following orders, any orders not directly from your cage or in name of your cage are treason." Turning to Minato, Even when the man started to plead for it to get him out, he said, "He's all yours, Hokage Dono, or Hyuga Dono if he feels the need to retaliate. Kumo or mine will not act out against Konoha or the Hyuga clan for this." Glancing back at the man still pleading for his life, he added, "He's the son of one of my elders." No doubt his father mentioned that they aren't in agreement with my most recent choices, and he followed whatever it was he was told without thinking of the consequences. Minato hummed, "I see, I'll reflect on that with the Hyuga clan head and see what action they wish to take. I am however happy that this wasn't a setup by Kumo." He didn't flinch, but it was easy to see I was having a hard time with this. The memory of what Kumo had done to Kushina, who is now the Hokage's wife, as well as Minato's interaction with him and Bee during the war left a lasting effect. I did, however, look at Asura. Let's just say that my eyes were opened by one much wiser than I. Grinning at that, Minato nodded. "I understand the feeling, come, as you are here let's talk next steps for an alliance." With that, the cage and their entourage left, leaving Asura to bring up the rear and look for his siblings, Bee and Yujiro. Looking forward to see what they talked about, chances were it was much the same, but knowing they had a moment alone would be nice. Stepping into the room he had last seen the inn, Asura took a seat, finding his lap full of Kurama now back the size of a house cat who filled him in on what he missed. -0 to 0 to 0 B. Yujiro and their delegation stayed in Konoha for a couple of nights after it became clear that and Minato had a lot to talk about. His apologies to Kushina for what Kumo had tried to do had helped a lot as well. In fact, the Kumo nin only left once they got a hawk from C, the only one who stayed behind right now, that people were wondering what was going on. Especially the elder who had sent his son to Konoha. I had been given the man's headband after it became clear that the Hyuga clan wouldn't tolerate the kidnapping of their heiress. Even less so by someone not even acting on their caged orders. That was bound to be a fun conversation with those still in Kumo, but a problem for when he arrived there. Asura waved at them as they left, Indra at his side as they kept an eye out just to be sure. Once that was over, they both made their way back to the Uzumaki compound where they had a house to themselves. Quite taken with the knowledge that they had a home once more, especially with everything that had happened. "Do you think this will be the last cage we'll see, Indra?" Asura asked. Indra on his turn snorted, "Not Eve close, I do think we should expect more to start popping up soon. Maybe tell Minato to keep an eye out, as I doubt he's be ready for all of them. Then again, we both did the groundwork for years now. All he needs to do it, bring it all together for when Zetsu does come above ground again." Thinking about that pest never went over well, however. They had done everything to make his job as hard as possible. Scattering the Akatsuki, which would be a pain in the butt, or in the case of Itachi and Deidara, made sure they were never a part of them to begin with. After bringing back Yahiko, they also made sure to banish the statue back to the moon. With only Nagato and Indra being able to summon it back, they didn't need to worry about that right now. Zetsu, as they had suspected, had disappeared. The being no doubt had smelled that something was amiss and had gone underground. They kept an eye out, but knew that if Zetsu didn't want to be found, they wouldn't find him either. It was way too good at hiding, had done so for so long after the defeat of Kaguya. It must have shown on his face, because Kurama wrapped his tails around him. "Don't do that, Asura, there was nothing more you could have done. We're working towards a better world for all of those in it. Nothing will happen, as will be made aware if the pest turns up if not. There is really nothing more you can do at this moment." Frowning, Asura doesn't know what to say to that. He hates that they weren't able to take care of Zetsu before, that the best is still out there doing who knows what. It eats at him, knowing there might be a chance Zetsu is still working against them. Indra, shaking his head, pulls Asura into his side for a hug as they make their way back to the compound. It's clear that he's trying to keep Asura out of his head. He's good at that, especially now that neither of them is influenced. "You need to stop thinking like that, Atauro. Despite what title you carry, the whole world isn't your responsibility. You can't do that to yourself. Otu-sama wouldn't want you to do that to yourself, so stop, please," he whispers. something that is a hard on the elder, as he knew his own peace in why Asura believed that. Sighing, he stops walking before turning himself into Indra's arms for a full hug. Feel the tension drain from his shoulders as he does so, knowing that he isn't alone here anymore. He doesn't have to deal with all of this on his own, or with those that don't want to listen. It helps, but he does need a reminder now and again to see that he can let go of some pieces as well. In a way, he can recognize the damage done to his way of thinking in his life as Naruto, where he only got positive interactions after he proved himself again and again. Part of him reverted back to that to make sure he didn't lose those positive interactions. You need to stop thinking you are alone in this, Asura, you are not. You've done so much for the world to make sure you are not alone. People who were unable to be in the same room as each other are working together to make a better world. They are working towards a common goal because you directed them to that, Kurama offered, adding on, you have this way with people, making them listen and follow your lead. Let Zetsu come when he believes he has a chance. He won't manage that, we'll make sure he won't manage that. Indra nods in agreement, hugging him tighter, knowing that this is something he needs right now. Leading him towards the Uzumaki compound once he's able to, taking their time and enjoying the scenery of Konoha. As only they could, having known what it was reduced to, the people around them were fine and would be fine hundreds of years from now. Once in their own home, Asura settled down on his bed to take a nap. Kurama curled up next to him, and Indra keeping watch while tidying the house as he kept busy. No matter what came next, they would be ready and they would be able to keep it at bay. Chapter 14, chapter text with the appearance of Kumo Nin. As well as A and B with a delegation, taking the time to talk to Minato about next steps they needed to take, it became clear that something was happening. With what had happened, and what his own council had been trying to do, A was more than willing to form an alliance with Minato to see what could or could not be done with the future in mind. More than once the two cages would look at Asura and Indra when they passed the two brothers, making it clear that they were doing this for them. That what they had been told made them put former grudges aside to work towards a better future. A and B left again, if you'd care to know, Minato shared one night at dinner. His eyes on Asura as he expected something from the other man, tilting up an eyebrow, Asura nodded. Good, Kumo can't be left alone for too long. Even less so once it came out that the Elder Council was planning against the cage. I still don't know what they expected to happen. Minato blinked once. You don't want to know what we talked about. Asura tilted his head, taking a moment to look at the man who in one life had been his father. Should I? Your Hawkage, Minato. I won't have a hand in what it is that you're deciding or changing. I'm only doing what I believe is best, and with Indra and my ties to Konoha, we settled here. Huffing, Indra did add that they were contemplating Uzushio too. Until they realized that the other village would be Mtai and deserted. Going there not too long ago also showed that the spirits of those past were still there, so it wouldn't have been a good place to stay for a long period of time. Too many ghosts already haunted them, to add to that wouldn't be healthy. The table went quiet before Kushina spoke up. They don't care, Minato. All they want is to make sure there is a future for us to live, so whatever it is that you want to do, do it. The blonde man looked stumped at that, before he was looking sheepish. No doubt still used to the Sandaime, and his counsel to try and implement certain things. Despite dealing with Danzo over TWO years ago, the scars of what the man had done were visible today. Asura had gone to the hospital more than once to help out, being confronted with all the children that once upon a time had been root to the core felt off. To the point that Kurama and Indra had hugged him close when he came back home. Despite who we are and what we're doing, we have no intention of just taking over, Hokage-sama. We are more than willing to be your counsel if you need it, but we aren't going to make decisions for you, Indra said, softly. Seeing Minato still look stumped at that, it became clear how young he was in the grand scheme of things. A Hokage he might be, but he was only just out of his teen years. There hadn't been anyone else in Konoha fit for the role. They knew that, which made it all the more obvious that Danzo was paving the way for himself. He didn't want anyone else to take on that role, made sure that those who could be considered were out of Konoha or death. Smiling as he looked at Minato, Asura spoke, "You have to do what is best for Konoha, Minato. No matter what happens next. Things are moving after all even more so with Kumo just leaving and a hawk arriving from Keisukedono that he would like to visit with his family. Regardless of what we did for them, what we did for our siblings, we're doing this for the betterment of the world, which is our only prerogative." He didn't say anything to that, just thought long and hard. A look that disappeared off of his face once Naruto cooed and held out his hands to his father. Minato's face cleared up, reaching for his son and placing him on his lap, once more being reminded that this is why they were doing this. That, even if Asura was strong and powerful, he didn't want his son to grow up alone and fighting for his life all the time. "I see. I guess it's not that easy to go about changing things which have been rooted in place for so long. I'm afraid I'll destroy what Hashirama-sama has built." This is again directed at Asura, as he had been Hashirama once upon a time. It makes sense why he's looking at them in guidance, to make sure that what he is doing doesn't go against their ideals or plans for Konoha as a whole. It was sweet that he was doubting himself there, but they had the full confidence that he was going to be able to make the most of it. A soft smile appears as he looks at Minato. "I want it all to flourish, Indra, and I came here to make sure this world wouldn't meet the end ours did. That's really all we're here to do. Standing as your counsel is something we'll gladly do if you feel like you need this. But Minato, you are more than capable of doing this, of leading the village and of making the choices that will shape it for generations to come. We're just here to observe mostly, and not to interfere too much." Exchanging a smile, Indra and Asura knew things would go well, saying as much to Minato, who seemed to relax even more at that. They left that topic behind after this, concentrating on other matters and enjoying a relaxing atmosphere on the compound. Among them, how the new Uzumaki were settling in. As it seemed a flood had been opened once they moved to Konoha, in sending a message to those that survived that there was still a possibility in Konoha right now. The following weeks it became clear that Minato had taken their words to heart, sending out hawks or messages by courier to invite all Kage to a Gakage meet. Mentioning to Asura and Indra that he wanted to work with them all in seeing what the best course of action was. Not all of them were aware of what it was they were, but they knew the both of them were very powerful shinobi connected to the Biju. Their hand in supporting the villages, even with a Konoha headband, hadn't been forgotten either. Kiri especially was happy that they had been there for your young Kage, when it seemed like he was slipping into insanity. He wasn't, as there had been something going on that might have been Zetsu's doing, but they took care of it regardless. As such, it was no surprise that Kiri, Kumo and Suna were the first ones to agree to come to Konoha for that meeting. Mentioning that even if they wouldn't join this alliance, they owed it to Asura and Indra to at least listen. As Minato told them that at dinner, they didn't know how to react to that, not knowing what they had done to deserve such devotion. Kurama rolled his eyes. "Don't tell me you both forgot. You're able to influence people in the best way possible, and that's all you have both been doing when we were gone from Konoha. You moved with the precision of someone who was aware of what needed to happen. You both know what needs to happen, which is why you're both here too. Zetsu needs to be gone, and while we can't take care of him while he's underground, we can prepare the world for when he does reappear." Smiling sheepishly at Kurama, Asura nodded in agreement. He knew that Zetsu would appear sooner rather than later. On top of that, it was more than clear that with Obaido and Nagato here, the slippery bastard might try to take them back. Minato was visibly nervous. But as he had seen what could be possible if they all worked together, he was doing all he could do to make sure this happened before the world was on the brink of breaking down. He wanted to make sure they had a defense set up in the off chance something worse than Kaguya was out there. On top of that, even with the Shinju back in the moon, it wouldn't be too out there to think that it could be brought back. Clasping him on the shoulder as they left the main house, both Indra and Asura assured the man that he was doing everything he could, and they would stand as his counsel together with Shikaku as the Jounin commander. Once back in their own home, Asura settled on the futon they had laying out. I didn't think things could change quite this fast. Laughing, Indra settled down next to him. We're working with insider information, remember. We have a general idea of what happened before. If we can work against that, work to make sure that doesn't happen, we'll be able to get somewhere much faster. It went unsaid that before it did indeed take the world almost ending before they acted. By then it was almost too late. Asura died and Indra died too. Only to be revived more than once and get right back into fighting. They wanted to make sure the world would live longer than they did. To make sure that it was somewhere their siblings would be safe and looked after. Did you see the way Naruto looked at Kurama? Indra asked, a grin on his lips. Asura nodded, he had seen it too. The awe and wonder in the 3-year-old's eyes. The way that he didn't flinch away from Kurama, but was careful with his fur and with the tails that he had laying around. Not even Kushina, as his jailer before, seemed to be on edge, which only showed how much things could grow if they were allowed to. Kurama huffed, uncurling from where he had also claimed his spot on the futon. For all that he was full-grown, they noticed that he preferred to stay small about the side of a dog to keep out of sight better than his full form would be able to do. On top of that, it became clear that now he wasn't locked up all the time. His temper improved quite a bit. The little one is indeed quite interested. His chakra also feels very similar to yours, Asura, he stated. While he knew what had been happening with them to Kurama, Naruto and Asura were very different people. The only thing they did have in common, the same with Indra and Sasuke, was that their chakra seemed to resonate. Which, given everything that connected them, was more than likely to be contributed to that. Sasuke and Naruto were part of why they wanted to do this so much. To make sure that their younger selves had a chance at a life without bloodshed and loss. No one should have been forced to go through with that, and while they didn't have any other choice, it did scar them in a way that they wouldn't wish upon anyone else. A soft smile appears on Asura's face. I want to see what he'll grow up to be. How Naruto, surrounded by love and support, will be compared to how I grew up. I have a feeling he's still going to change the world. It'll just be in a different way compared to how we did it. Indra scoffed, even if it was obvious that he wanted about the same for Sasuke. To have family growing up, to not have to hate Itachi for something his older brother had done in an effort to protect him. To make sure that Konoha's green leaves would last one more generation. Chapter 15, chapter text. In the end, Zetsu realized he needed to play the long game again. With everything that had been going on, he knew that there was someone out there working against him, so he went to ground. Probably thinking that in time he could start all over again. Never thinking that the reason he couldn't get what he wanted was because those that knew were working against him from all angles. Indra and Asura, as well as the Biju, kept an eye out on all times. Now that they were working towards world peace, that was one of their main priorities. Especially now that Minato had gotten the Othet cage in Konoha, and there had been a talk about everything that had been going on and might just go on after they were all gone. Asura had been there as well, sharing what it was that he knew and how he believed they could prevent the world from collapsing. That had been the first step. There was communication and there was, if not peace, at least an understanding. Everything they had done came down to this. That the world was slowly healing and people were willing to look beyond the insignia people wore on their forehead or elsewhere and saw that they needed to work together to make sure that this world was worth living. The Chunin exams were reworked, to the point that all of the villages were welcome to participate. They made sure to set up a scenario where it was shown just how well they could think on their feet. And how well they were able to work together, not only with their own team, but with others as well. If push came to shove, it didn't matter who was next to you, you needed to find a way to make it work and fast. There hadn't been any casualties in years, and those that did happen at the start had been their own fault. Children of elders, or those too set in their ways, had lashed out at other villages, and the end result wasn't always a good thing. More than one Chunin hopeful hadn't made it out of the exams. Some of that had been killed by others, while those responsible had been held accountable to the point that they and their families were taken care of. That moment had shown that some of the older generations didn't want peace. They wanted to keep the bloodshed and the loss of lives. Minato, who had already dealt with his elder council, had been an example on how it could be. What people could do to make sure that their village survived in the end. Years had passed since then, to the point that Naruto was a Chunin hopeful now. He, Sasuke and Sakura, and hadn't that been hard to see, became genin on their first try, being taken on by Shisui as their Jounin sensei. At one point, Asura had wondered how Kakashi would fare, but the man had so much healing to do still that it wouldn't be safe to have him working with children. He and Abaido were healing each other, while trying to adapt to a life where they weren't on the verge of collapsing. Minato especially took it hard. He never saw Kakashi so on edge, but having Abaido in his life made it clearer every day. As such as Hawkage, he decided to retire the both of them until or unless they wanted to come back. Right now, that hadn't happened yet, although both men would be more than willing to support them if needed. Looking on at the final part of the Chunin exams, Asura grinned as he waved at Naruto. Isn't it odd to see how much he has grown? Kurama, around his neck, and Indra on the seat next to him, hummed in agreement. Both of them were curious to see what would happen now, especially as Naruto had a very different upbringing. He wanted to show his parents what he was capable of, and with Kushina benched after his birth, Naruto had a couple of siblings who he wanted to protect as a good big brother. It's so odd to see what could have happened if it had changed, Asura sighed. I think it's old age that's making me nostalgic, but I look forward to how much change will come from this. There is already so much that is different, and I can't wait to see how that will change the course of it all. Indra wrapped his arm around Asura, pulling his younger brother close as the match started. All of them cheering for each hopeful that made it further in the exam finals. People from all villages were around each other, cheering for those hopefuls regardless of where they came from. Of course, it was in the second to last match, which happened to be Naruto against Sasuke, that the world needed to remind them that things did happen. Asura was on his feet and looking around as soon as he tasted a flicker of chakra, his eyes narrowing as he tried to get a hold on where Zetsu was hiding now. Kurama, realizing that, fed him some chakra, which gave people around them a show on how a Biju and human interaction could have worked. Where? Indra asked, his Rinnegan on full display as he tried to find the pest. Shaking his head, Asura mentioned to the Anbu around them that they needed to do something. Before they were able to do so, Naruto yelped, which made it clear that the little shit truly believed that he was holding the Jinchuriki of Kurama. His claws were digging into Naruto's stomach, which was more than enough to make several people very angry. Jumping down, it was clear Zetsu knew he went in the wrong at the sight of Indra and Asura, gaping as they stood there. Impossible. Snorting, Indra was on him in a second, making sure Naruto was released and in Asura's safe hands. Getting the pest outside of the stadium as soon as possible, knowing he needed to keep him busy until such a moment that Asura could assist. Asura, on the other hand, settled down next to Naruto, pressing a glowing hand to his side and humming when he found that it wasn't too bad. Still, he fixed him up, before taking a hold of both him and Sasuke to get them to their families before this got out of hand. One look at Minato made it clear that his was what the brothers had been waiting for. With that, Asura jumped down, making his way to where Indra was keeping Zetsu in check. Stepping into the clearing he found his brother in, to look at the Black Spectre as he tried to convince Indra of the great things they could do together. "Don't bother, you pest," Asura hissed. "You already ruined so much, and for what?" He was angry right now. This was the being that had harmed them, had made so much fall to pieces, and they still didn't know for what. Once the world was barren, there was no victory for the Utsutsuki either. Zetsu turned, his face pulling into a sneer at the sight of him standing there. Asura. Tilting up an eyebrow, Asura rolled his eyes. "After everything, did you really think that I would leave Indra alone again, you pest? You have nothing to give, not to him, not to me, and not to our siblings. If anything, you just want to damn the world to the underworld, and back, which is something we're not allowing you to do. Kaguya had her time and she failed, time for you to see that too. As expected, Zetsu tried to attack Asura, who sidestepped it, hitting the specter with a fist charged in nature chakra, which had Zetus yelping before Asura and Indra were on him, pinning him to the ground and making sure the bastard had nowhere else to go. Just in case, Kurama had stayed with Naruto and Kushina, as they didn't know what Zetsu would do, and they didn't need to give him the strongest Biju in this phase of whatever plan he was trying to do. It put Asura as a slight disadvantage, but it was one he gladly took. Between Senjutsu and Mokyuten, he would be able to keep a hold on Zetsu. He had to pay back the bastard for everything he had done, to his first family and all the ones after. Holding up his hand, where the symbol for the sun was set, Asura could see Indra doing the same one with the moon. They would make sure that this pest would never ever have the chance to get in between them, or any other pair who could have changed the world for the better. You don't have a place here anymore. This is a new era, and those like you won't have a place in that warmongering and spilling blood. Asura said definitely, pressing his hand against Zetsu and feeling Indra do the same. Their chakra mingling before the pest disappeared, sinking into the earth as if he had never been there before. Staying quiet for a second, sensing around them to see that he hadn't gotten away with it once more. It became clear that he had it, making Asura let out a short laugh. "We did it!" Smiling, Indra nodded, sliding down to sit on the ground, pulling Asura into his side for a hug where they stayed for a little while, trying to get over the fact that it was all over now. That Zetsu wasn't an issue anymore, that Kaguya wouldn't make her way to this plane again. Taking a moment, they were brought back to the now when Kurama dashed through the bushes, Bee, Roshi, and Minato on his heels. All three of the humans sighing in relief at the sight of Indra and Asura sitting there. Minato even going over, after Kurama, to pull them both into a hug. Hugging back, they sighed, "It's over." The two Jinchuriki cheered at that, before Kurama curled up on Asura's shoulders again, as Minato helped them stand and led them towards the arena again. Something new and refreshing seemed to blow with the wind, as if this was what the earth herself wanted to see. Following along with the exams, it was no surprise that several of them, including Naruto and Sasuke, were promoted to Chunin. Gaara, Temari, Shikamaru, Hinata, Neji, Fu, and Haku were promoted as well. Seeing Haku there accompanied by Zabuza, Yagura, and Mei was odd, but not unwelcome for Indra and Asura. It showed just how much things had changed now, how well their way of doing things had changed at all. They had changed enough that a new era was starting, Minato mentioning as much when he congratulated the new Chunin, adding that he was happy they were entering a period of peace and prosperity. Looking at the two of them, when he mentioned that the world was changing, and he for one was looking forward to what that would bring. -0 to 0 to 0, it would be several years before they were shown that Kaguya hadn't been the only Utsutsuki. However, those that came from the sky, this time around, hadn't been made aware of how much the world had changed. Indra and Asura took care of them before any of the villages knew what was going on, grinning widely as they kicked ass without remorse. This was their world now, and they weren't planning on giving it back. "This is ours now. Cousin, you were too late in stepping in, and now you lost what it was you're looking for. Nothing is up for grabs this time around, so scurry away where you came from and never come back," Asura declared. Of course they didn't let up, but they had been given fair warning. Taking them out had been their pleasure, one that set right something they didn't even had been on edge, something that brought a sense of unease to them. With the Utsutsuki reminded that this wasn't their farm anymore, they could start thinking about what they wanted for the future.